Hello, welcome one and all. Before we dive headfirst into the fascinating, bizarre, and often hilariously inconvenient world of the Soviet Union, I have a burning question for all you intrepid listeners and viewers out there. Seriously, I'm genuinely curious. Where in the glorious, interconnected world are you joining us from right now? Are you cozied up in California, brewing your morning coffee? Perhaps it's a late-night listen in London, or maybe you're just waking up to this madness in Melbourne. Drop a comment, send a smoke signal, or telepathically transmit your location and the current time, because it absolutely blows my mind that people are falling asleep, waking up, or just trying to survive their commute while listening to me prattle on about shared toilets and questionable 5-year plans. It's a truly global party, and you, my friends, are the star guests. All right, now that we've established our global commune, let's get down to brass tacks. The Soviet Union. The very name conjures images, doesn't it? For many of us in the West, our understanding of this colossal ideological experiment was largely shaped by Hollywood. You know the drill. Cold War thrillers, steely-eyed KGB agents lurking in the shadows, concrete jungles as far as the eye can see, and a pervasive sense of grim, grey despair. Every Russian apparently lived in a perpetual state of existential dread, subsisting on borscht and propaganda. Well, let me tell you, comrades, the reality was way more bizarre, often funnier, and in some ways infinitely more frustrating than any spy movie could ever truly capture. Forget James Bond's gadgets. Soviet citizens were masters of improvisation, navigating a daily obstacle course of shortages, bureaucracy, and the relentless pursuit of, well, a toilet that wasn't already occupied. Imagine, if you will, waking up in a place where your personal bathroom wasn't personal at all. I'm talking about a toilet and shower shared with, say, 7 other families. Yes, you heard that right. Not just your eccentric Aunt Mildred and her 10 cats, but complete strangers. Every single morning became a strategic military operation just to brush your teeth without someone pounding on the door, threatening to report you to the building committee for excessive gargling. That, my friends, was daily life for millions of Soviet citizens, and while you, my fortunate listeners, lie there in your soft beds with your private bathrooms just steps away, let me paint you a vivid, slightly comical and utterly authentic picture of what it meant to wake up on the other side of the Iron Curtain. Oh, and if these stories are tickling your funny bone, or just making you incredibly grateful for indoor plumbing, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. It helps us spread the word, and who knows, maybe we can collectively raise enough awareness to prevent future shared bathroom nightmares. Leningrad, 1953. The Communal Apartment Awakening. Alright everybody, get comfortable. Seriously, adjust those pillows, pull up that blanket, because where we're going, you're going to want to be cozy. We're heading back to the Soviet Union of the 1950s. Specifically, we're dropping you right into a Soviet communal apartment in Leningrad, 1953. Stalin has just shuffled off his mortal coil, or rather, been gently encouraged off it by history. But his legacy, much like a stubborn stain on a communal bathtub, is everywhere around you. The air in your room is chilly. Forget perfectly regulated thermostats. Central heating exists, but it's about as consistent as a politician's promise. Your breath makes little clouds in the morning air, adding a whimsical touch to your impending hypothermia. The thin blanket you've piled with an impressive array of coats, socks, and perhaps a small, anxious hamster for extra warmth has left you with a slight backache. Not quite your comfy memory foam, perfectly temperature-controlled haven, is it? Your ears are the first to wake up. They pick up the symphony of communal living before your eyes fully open. The clatter of pots in the shared kitchen. Probably a frantic scramble for the single available burner. Someone's argument, likely a passionate debate about who borrowed the last of the sugar without asking. A toilet flushing through ancient pipes that groan like they're being tortured. A sound that will forever haunt your dreams. And of course, the obligatory baby crying in the room next door, reminding everyone that even in socialism, babies have their capitalist demands for attention. The walls in these old pre-revolutionary apartments are thick, built for a different era, but the doors, paper thin. Sound travels in strange, unpredictable ways, sometimes amplifying the most mundane noises into booming pronouncements. You, my friend, are one of the lucky ones. Your family has a room to itself. A single room, mind you, not an apartment. It measures about 150 square feet, roughly the size of a very generous walk-in closet in a western suburb. This tiny space is your entire universe. It's where you sleep, eat, when you're not wrestling for kitchen access, entertain guests, who are probably sitting on your bed, and store literally everything you own. Privacy? That's a luxury that simply doesn't exist here. The concept would seem almost bourgeois. You swing your legs over the side of the narrow bed that cleverly doubles as a couch during the day. Your parents, meanwhile, are performing their own contortionist act on the fold-out bed on the opposite wall. The small table between you will later be cleared for meals, because multifunctionality is the name of the game. Your clothing hangs on hooks along the wall. No closet, no dresser. Space is far too precious to waste on such decadent luxuries. Time to face the morning challenge, the bathroom in a communal apartment with 8 families. Timing, my friends, is everything. Too early and you'll be shivering in the cold, contemplating whether frostbite is worth being first in line. Too late, and you'll be standing in a queue, possibly making yourself late for work or school. The unwritten schedule, grudgingly followed by everyone, gives each family a precious 15 minutes. Some mornings that's barely enough time to use the toilet, splash water on your face, and conduct a lightning-fast toothbrushing operation. You grab your toiletry kit, everyone keeps their personal items separate, a small bastion of individuality, and your towel. You open your door carefully, trying to avoid the infamous squeak that might wake the neighbour's perpetually angry baby. An angry neighbour is the last thing you need this early. They might accidentally forget to tell you when the hot water is actually hot. You step into the long, dimly lit corridor that connects all the rooms, illuminated by a single mournful yellow bulb. The parquet flooring, once elegant in pre-revolutionary times, when this was a grand single apartment for a wealthy family, is now worn down by decades of frantic foot traffic. The wallpaper is peeling in places, revealing layers beneath like geological strata, each representing a different, equally drab era of Soviet history. The bathroom door is closed. Bad sign. You sigh. This is normal. This is life. The daily negotiation of shared space that every Soviet citizen learns from childhood. While you wait for the bathroom to liberate itself, you might as well check the day schedule posted near the kitchen entrance. This is an informal system to manage kitchen time slots, especially for dinner when everyone is simultaneously trying to cook something that vaguely resembles a meal. The kitchen itself is a strange, fascinating mix of private and public. Each family has their own designated shelf in the single, often ancient refrigerator, their own tiny cabinet for dry goods, usually guarded with the ferocity of a dragon protecting its hoard, and often their own cooking burner. The single gas stove has been modified over the years to accommodate multiple pots simultaneously, with 4 or 5 burners of varying reliability. Some enterprising families have even installed their own separate electric burners, technically not allowed, but a necessary evil to avoid the inevitable conflicts over cooking times. Imagine the tension. It's like a cooking show where everyone is perpetually running out of ingredients and threatening to report each other to the HOA. The bathroom ritual and morning fuel. Finally, the bathroom door opens. Steam billows out, as if a small personal cloud has just been unleashed. Nikolva, the elderly widow who seems to take the longest despite having the least hair to wash, emerges, her thin strands wrapped in a towel. She gives you a curt nod as she passes, a silent acknowledgement of your shared purgatory. Dmitry Petrovich, the factory foreman who lives in the room near the entrance, gestures for you to go ahead. His need is less urgent than yours. A small kindness in a system where small kindnesses matter enormously. The bathroom is basic. A stained tub with a shower attachment, a toilet with a chain pull, a cracked sink. But this morning, a miracle. The hot water is actually hot. A good omen for the day ahead. You rush through your routine, keeping one eye on your watch. 7 minutes. 8. You need to leave enough time for others. Punctuality, even for a shared shower, is a civic duty. Back in your family's room, your mother is already up, heating water on the small electric burner that's technically not allowed, but that everyone has anyway. It's for tea. the lifeblood of any Russian morning. The samovar, a family heirloom that somehow survived the revolution, the civil war, the purges, and the Great Patriotic War. What Russians stoically call World War II, sits ready to serve. "Hurry," she says, not unkindly. Your father has already gone to the bread line. This too is part of the daily choreography. Your father, a man of quiet determination, rises before dawn 3 times a week to stand in line at the bakery. Fresh bread is one of the reliable pleasures of Soviet life, and the state keeps it affordable. But you have to be willing to wait for it. On his assigned days, your father brings back enough for your family and for the Knyazevs down the hall. On alternate days, Mr. Knyazev does the same. These unofficial arrangements, these systems of mutual aid, are how people truly survive. It's a beautiful, if somewhat desperate, ballet of community. Your mother hands you a cup of strong black tea and a bowl of kasha, buckwheat porridge, sweetened with a precious spoonful of sugar. You eat quickly, standing up to save time. The routine is so ingrained you barely notice it anymore. "They're saying there might be oranges at the gastronome today," your mother says, referring to the state food shop 3 blocks away. "I'll try to go during my lunch break." Oranges. The word itself feels exotic, a burst of vibrant colour in the monochrome winter. They appear rarely, these southern fruits, making their way to Leningrad from Soviet Georgia, or sometimes even from abroad. Their scarcity makes them special. If your mother is lucky enough to get some, one will be saved for a special occasion, maybe even New Year's, still months away. An orange on New Year's. Now, that's luxury. The daily commute, a public spectacle. You finish your tea, grab your heavy wool coat from its hook, practical rather than fashionable, because style isn't a priority in the Soviet 1950s. Functionality matters more than fashion. Before leaving, you check yourself in the small mirror near the door. Your clothes are clean and presentable, if not exactly stylish. You're ready to face the day. Outside the apartment, the stairwell is dark and smells faintly of cabbage and tobacco. The elevator, installed sometime in the 1930s, has been broken for as long as anyone can remember. You walk down 5 flights, your footsteps echoing in the stairwell. The street greets you with a blast of cold air. October in Leningrad means the beginning of the long, slow descent into winter. The sky is the colour of wet cement, and a light drizzle falls, not quite rain, but enough to dampen your spirits along with your coat. People hurry along the sidewalks, collars turned up, heads down against the weather. The tram stop is crowded with workers heading to the morning shift. You join the huddle, stamping your feet against the cold. When the tram finally arrives, it's already full, but somehow everyone manages to squeeze aboard, bodies pressed together in a strange intimacy that nobody acknowledges. It's like a sardine can, but with more layers of practical, unstylish clothing. The tram rattles through the streets of Leningrad, past the grand buildings of the imperial era, now divided into communal apartments like yours. Past newer apartment blocks, built hastily after the war to address the desperate housing shortage. The city is a layer cake of history. Baroque palaces alongside constructivist workers' clubs, alongside classical Stalinist architecture. Through the fogged windows, you catch glimpses of the city waking up, lines already forming outside shops, women with string bags hoping for a delivery of something worth buying. Street sweepers in orange vests clearing the previous day's debris, posters on walls proclaiming the success of the latest 5-year plan, showing happy workers exceeding their quotas, their faces alight with socialist fervour. The reality inside the tram is, shall we say, less enthusiastic. Faces are tired, resigned to another day of work in factories or offices, where initiative is rarely rewarded, and meeting the plan is what matters, not actual productivity or innovation. Yet there's a certain security too. Everyone has a job, everyone has a place, however humble. At your stop, you squeeze your way to the exit, mumbling "excuse me" and "pardon" as you step on toes and brush against damp coats. Outside again, you join the stream of workers heading toward the factory gates. The Kirov Works spreads out before you, a sprawling complex of buildings where thousands of workers produce machinery for the Soviet state. Smokestacks release plumes into the grey sky, and the sound of metal on metal creates a constant industrial backdrop. The factory is a city unto itself with its own rhythms and hierarchies. At the gate, you show your papers to the guard, who barely glances at them. He sees you every day, after all. Inside, you head to your section, nodding to colleagues along the way. The changing room is humid with the body heat of workers removing street clothes and donning work attire. Conversation is muted, practical. Who has heard about a shipment of winter boots coming to the department store? Whose child is sick? Which section of the factory might exceed its quota this month, earning everyone a bonus? The factory floor, building socialism one part at a time. Your locker contains your work clothes, sturdy pants, a thick shirt, protective gear for your specific job. You change quickly. The workday waits for no one, and tardiness can mean trouble with the shift supervisor, or worse, attention from the party representative, who keeps a watchful eye on worker discipline. The factory floor is already humming with activity when you arrive at your station. The noise is immediate and enveloping, machines pounding metal, screeching against metal, the shouts of foremen making themselves heard above the din. The air is thick with the smell of oil and hot metal, and the sweat of hundreds of workers. Your job is precise and repetitive, operating a lathe that shapes metal components for tractors. These tractors will go to collective farms across the Soviet Union, part of the endless drive to mechanize agriculture and increase production. You take pride in your work, despite the monotony. There's something satisfying about seeing the raw metal transformed into a useful part, about knowing your hands have created something that will help feed the country. The morning passes in the familiar rhythm of work. Your hands move almost without conscious thought, muscle memory taking over. Your mind wanders, as it often does, to dreams and plans, maybe saving enough for a radio, maybe one day getting your own apartment through the factory housing list, though the wait is years long, maybe seeing your name on the board of top workers, earning a little extra money and respect. Around you, the great machine of Soviet industry grinds on, workers at their stations, each a cog in the vast apparatus of the state economy, quotas to meet, plans to fulfill, the new Soviet man and woman building socialism through labor. But the reality is more complex than the propaganda posters suggest. You see how corners are cut when materials run short, how quality is sacrificed for quantity when the end of the month approaches and quotas loom, how the official numbers reported upward bear little resemblance to what's actually produced. You see too the small resistances, workers slowing down when supervisors aren't watching, saving their energy. The jokes whispered during breaks, subtle mockeries of the system everyone depends on but few fully believe in anymore. The informal networks that ensure you can get the parts you need when official channels fail. This, my friends, is the double reality of Soviet life in the 1950s. The official story of socialist progress marching ever forward, and the lived experience of ordinary people navigating shortages, bureaucracy, and the thousand small frustrations of daily existence. Mid-morning, the factory horn sounds for the first break. 10 minutes to stretch, to grab a quick smoke for those who do, to exchange a few words with colleagues. The factory cafeteria is open, serving weak tea and basic snacks. Some workers bring their own food from home, a sandwich perhaps, or leftover kasha from breakfast. You step outside for a moment, grateful for the fresh air despite the drizzle. The factory yard is grey concrete, but beyond the walls you can see the city, and beyond that, glimpses of the Baltic Sea. Even through the industrial haze, there's a certain beauty to Leningrad, the city built by Peter the Great as Russia's window to the west, the city that survived 900 days of Nazi siege during the war. The horn sounds again. Break over. Back to the machines. Back to the quotas. Back to building the socialist future, one tractor part at a time. The day stretches ahead, predictable in its demands, yet full of the small human dramas that unfold in any workplace. The lathe spins up again, metal shavings curling away from the blade. Another component takes shape under your practiced hands. Another small piece of the Soviet economy slides into place. The morning shift continues, each hour marked by the factory clock that everyone watches with the same intensity. Time moves differently here, stretching out during the long hours of work, then suddenly accelerating as the end of the shift approaches. There's a rhythm to factory life, as predictable as the seasons, yet never quite the same from day to day. You work steadily, your mind half on the task and half elsewhere. On the evening ahead, on the letter you received yesterday from a cousin in Moscow, on the rumour that the factory might exceed its monthly quota, meaning bonus pay for everyone. Small hopes and concerns, the very texture of ordinary life. Around you, the great industrial symphony plays on, the sounds of machinery, of human voices calling instructions or warnings, of metal and wood and the basic materials of production. This is the sound of socialism being built, or so the slogans say. The reality, as always, is more complicated. But for now, the work continues, carrying you through the morning toward whatever the rest of the day might bring. Moscow, 1962, the thaw and personal space. The factory horn blares, signalling the change of shift. But wait, we're not just changing shifts, we're changing years. It's now 1962, and the Soviet Union has evolved since Stalin's death. Khrushchev's thaw has brought subtle yet significant changes to everyday life. The pervasive fear that once permeated everything has lessened, though it hasn't disappeared entirely. People speak a little more freely, though they still watch what they say and where they say it. And you, my friend, have moved up in the world. After years of faithful service at the Kirov Works, you've been promoted to section supervisor at a newer factory in Moscow. The capital city pulses with an energy that Leningrad, for all its beauty, couldn't match. Moscow is the heart of Soviet power, where decisions that affect millions are made behind the Kremlin walls. More importantly, and prepare yourselves for this earth-shattering revelation, you now have your own apartment. Not a cramped room in a communal, but an actual one-bedroom apartment in one of the new Khrushchevka buildings sprouting across Moscow. These 5-story apartment blocks are basic, cheaply constructed with thin walls and tiny kitchens, but they offer something precious, something almost unheard of just a decade ago. Privacy, your own entrance, your own bathroom, your own kitchen. After years of communal living, this feels like unimaginable luxury. A toilet all to yourself, the dreams of a nation. The buildings themselves are identical, row after row of rectangular blocks arranged in neat micro-districts. From the outside, they look like giant filing cabinets for humans, but inside, each apartment, people create homes, applying their own touches to the standardized spaces. Your apartment has a small balcony where you've bravely placed a few plants that valiantly struggle against Moscow's pollution. The furniture is standard Soviet issue, functional rather than beautiful, but it's yours, all yours. Your morning routine is gloriously different now. You wake to an alarm clock instead of the cacophony of neighbours. The bathroom is free whenever you need it. Breakfast is still tea and perhaps bread with butter, but you prepare it in your own kitchen, at your own pace. Small freedoms, but they matter more than words can say. Your commute has changed too. The Moscow metro is a marvel of Soviet engineering and architecture. Unlike the utilitarian subway systems of many Western cities, Moscow's stations are underground palaces, decorated with mosaics, sculptures and chandeliers. Propaganda, yes, but beautiful propaganda, designed to elevate the daily experience of the ordinary worker, to suggest that the Soviet system values them enough to make even transit beautiful. It's like riding to work through a museum, albeit one with questionable ventilation during rush hour. You stand on the crowded platform, surrounded by workers heading to factories, offices, and construction sites across the capital. The train arrives precisely on schedule. The Moscow metro is famously reliable, and you squeeze aboard with dozens of others. Despite the crowd, there's a peculiar silence. Few people chat during the Moscow commute. Some read newspapers or books, but most just stare ahead, lost in thought, saving energy for the workday ahead. New responsibilities, the supervisor's balancing act. Your stop is in an industrial district on Moscow's outskirts. The factory itself is newer than the Kirov Works, built during the post-war industrial expansion. It produces components for Soviet televisions, still a luxury item for many families, but increasingly common as the Soviet standard of living slowly rises. As section supervisor, You have responsibilities beyond your own productivity. You oversee 20 workers, making sure they meet their quotas, maintaining discipline, and dealing with the inevitable problems that arise when materials run short or machinery breaks down. It's a delicate position, caught between the relentless demands of upper management and the often grim realities faced by workers on the floor. It's like being a tightrope walker, but the tightrope is made of red tape, and there are hungry bureaucrats waiting below. You arrive early, as always. Good supervisors set an example. Your office is little more than a glass-walled cubicle at the edge of the factory floor, but it represents your rise within the system. On the desk sits a photo of your family, a telephone that connects to other departments, and stacks of paperwork, the endless documentation that oils the gears of the Soviet bureaucracy. The morning meeting with other supervisors is the first order of business. The factory director, Comrade Volkov, presides. He's a party man, competent enough, but owing his position more to political reliability than technical expertise. His deputy, the chief engineer, Sokolov, is the one who really understands how things work. This division between political authority and practical knowledge is typical throughout the Soviet system. It's like having two captains on a ship, one who knows how to navigate and one who knows all the right songs to sing. Comrades, Volkov begins, adjusting his glasses, I've just come from the ministry meeting. The planned targets for the third quarter have been increased. We're expected to raise production by 12%. A murmur runs through the room. 12% is substantial, especially mid-year, when resources have already been allocated based on the original plan. Where are we supposed to get the additional materials? Asks Antonina Kuznetsova, supervisor of the assembly section. She's been at the factory since it opened and isn't afraid to ask difficult questions. You can almost see the gears turning in her head, trying to make the impossible possible. Volkov shrugs slightly. The ministry assures us the supply increases will follow. In the meantime, we must find reserves within our current allocations. Everyone knows what this means. Reserves is code for cutting corners, for making do, for the 1,000 improvisations that keep Soviet factories running despite the rigid planning system. It's understood, but never officially acknowledged, that meeting targets often requires creative solutions that might not strictly follow regulations. It's the unwritten rulebook of Soviet industry. The meeting continues with updates on various issues. A delayed shipment of components from Sverdlovsk, a visit from party officials next week, cue collective eye rolls, the upcoming factory sports competition. Throughout there's the unspoken subtext that everyone understands. The official goals and the practical realities rarely align perfectly, and the gap must be navigated carefully, with a healthy dose of "we'll figure it out." After the meeting, you head to your section to greet the workers as they arrive. You know each of them, their strengths and weaknesses, their family situations, their ambitions or lack thereof. There's Malik, a talented technician who drinks too much. Galina, a young woman recently graduated from technical school. Old Fyodor, who remembers the war and works with meticulous care, but at his own pace. Good morning, comrades, you say as they gather. We have new targets from above, 12% increase. The responses are predictable. Groans, eye-rolling, a few muttered comments. But there's no real resistance. Everyone knows how the system works. Targets increase, workers adapt, life goes on. We'll start by checking our inventory, you continue. Galina, Nikolai, go through the storage room, count everything, including the unofficial reserves. Everyone understands. The unofficial reserves are components and materials hidden away for emergencies, a common practice in Soviet factories where official supply channels often fail to deliver on time. It's technically against regulations, but without such measures, production would frequently grind to a halt. It's like a secret stash of emergency snacks, but for industrial components, navigating shortages and unofficial solutions. As the workers disperse to their stations, you feel the familiar tension of your position. You're responsible for meeting the planned targets, which means pushing your workers to produce more, faster. But you also know their capabilities and limitations. Push too hard and quality suffers or machinery breaks down. Not hard enough, and you miss the targets, with consequences for everyone's bonuses, and possibly your position. It's a constant balancing act, a high-stakes game of industrial Jenga. The factory day falls into its rhythm. Machines hum, components move along the production line. Workers perform their specialized tasks with varying degrees of enthusiasm and precision. Your job is to keep it all flowing, to solve problems before they become crises, to maintain the delicate balance between quantity and quality that the plan demands. Mid-morning, the first crisis hits. A machine on the assembly line stops working. The operator, Ivan, looks up with frustration. "Same problem as last month, Comrade Supervisor. The motor's overheating." You examine the machine. It should have been replaced years ago, but the new equipment promised by the ministry never arrived. "Get Pyotr from maintenance," you tell a nearby worker. Then to Ivan, "Can you work on the backup unit meanwhile?" The backup unit is older and slower, but it functions. This is another unofficial adaptation, keeping old equipment running past its scheduled replacement, finding workarounds for chronic shortages. Soviet factories excel at improvisation, at making do with what's available rather than what's actually needed. Pyotr arrives, toolbox in hand. He's nearing retirement age, with decades of experience fixing machinery that official protocols would have scrapped long ago. "Again?" he sighs, seeing the problem. "I'll see what I can do, but we need the new part from Kharkiv." "Is there anything in the workshop we could use?" you ask, meaning, can you fabricate something that will work well enough? Pyotr considers. "Maybe. Let me check what Sergei's been hoarding." He heads off toward the maintenance workshop, where Sergei, the head of maintenance, keeps his own unofficial inventory of parts salvaged from other machines or fabricated in-house. This is how things actually get done, through personal connections, unofficial channels, and creative interpretations of the rules. The formal system, with its rigid plans and centralized allocation of resources, is too slow and unresponsive to meet the daily challenges of production. So, a parallel system has evolved, one that everyone participates in, but nobody officially acknowledges. By noon, Pyotr has the machine running again, though he warns it won't last long without the proper replacement part. You make a note to call your counterpart at the Kharkiv factory. You once helped them out with some capacitors during a shortage, and perhaps they'll return the favour. The Soviet system thrives on these reciprocal favours, a subtle barter economy beneath the veneer of central planning. The lunch break offers a brief respite. The factory cafeteria serves basic but filling food at heavily subsidised prices. Cabbage soup, kotlety, meat patties, with mashed potatoes, compote to drink. Food is fuel here, not an experience to be savoured. Workers eat quickly, some reading the factory newspaper, others discussing last night's hockey match or sharing family news. You sit with the other supervisors, the conversation a mix of shop talk and careful gossip. Who's being considered for promotion to the central office? Is it true that the electronics factory across town received a shipment of Japanese components? Will the summer vacation schedules be approved soon? Information is a valuable currency in the Soviet system, and these informal exchanges are how much of it circulates. Official channels provide only selective facts, so people rely on personal networks to fill in the gaps. The result is a society where rumours flourish alongside official pronouncements, where truth is often somewhere in the middle, and where everyone becomes skilled at reading between the lines. Paperwork, politics, and personal ambition. Your afternoon is consumed with the paperwork that documents everything the section produces. The Soviet economy runs on documentation, forms filed in triplicate, reports for various departments, statistics that travel up the hierarchy to become part of the vast data collection that supposedly guides central planning. How much of this information actually influences decisions at the top is unclear, but the paperwork must be completed nonetheless. At your desk, you fill out production reports while keeping one eye on the factory floor through the glass partition. You've become adept at this division of attention, satisfying the bureaucracy while still managing actual production. It's a skill every successful Soviet manager develops. A knock at your door interrupts the paperwork. It's Dmitri from the personnel department, a young man with ambitions beyond his current position. His visits usually mean either a problem or an opportunity, sometimes both. "Comrade Supervisor," he says with a formality that suggests official business. "The party committee is reviewing candidates for the advanced training program in Moscow. Your name has been mentioned." This is significant news. The advanced training program could lead to a position at the ministry level, a considerable step up in both responsibility and privileges. But such opportunities in the Soviet system always come with political dimensions. I'm honoured, you reply carefully. Who has recommended me? The question is important. Sponsorship matters in the Soviet hierarchy, and knowing who supports you helps navigate the invisible currents of power. Dmitri smiles slightly. Comrade Sokolov spoke highly of your technical abilities, and of course your participation in last year's voluntary weekend work project was noted favourably. The translation is clear. The chief engineer values your competence, and your visible enthusiasm for officially promoted activities has been recognised. This is how advancement works, a combination of genuine ability and demonstrated political reliability. Not party membership necessarily, many managers aren't party members, but at least a willingness to participate in the rituals that affirm loyalty to the system. The committee would like to see more involvement in the factory's political education sessions, Dmitri adds. Perhaps you could lead one next month. The topic is technical innovation in service to socialist construction. And there's the implicit bargain. Show more political engagement, and the path to advancement opens wider. It's not crude coercion. You could decline without immediate consequences, but the incentives are clear. I'd be happy to prepare something, you say, knowing that an evening or two of research and writing is a small price for potential career advancement. After Dmitri leaves, you return to the production floor for the final hours of the shift. The afternoon energy is different, a combination of fatigue and the push to complete the day's quotas. Workers move with practiced efficiency, their bodies knowing the routines even as their minds might wander to evening plans or personal concerns. You make your rounds, checking quality, offering encouragement or correction as needed, maintaining the human connections that keep things running smoothly. A word of praise here, a suggestion there, a quiet warning to a worker whose attention is slipping. These micro-interactions are as important as the formal procedures in maintaining productivity. As the end of the shift approaches, there's the usual acceleration of activity. Nobody wants to leave tasks unfinished for the evening shift, partly from professional pride, and partly because incomplete work reflects badly on the section's performance metrics. The last hour sees a flurry of completions, quality checks and handovers. Finally, the horn sounds, signalling the end of the day shift. Workers quickly clean their stations, a point of Soviet industrial discipline, before heading to the changing rooms. The evening shift workers are already arriving, creating a brief overlap where information is exchanged, issues highlighted, continuity maintained. Your day isn't quite over. There's a final meeting with the other supervisors to review the day's production and address any issues before tomorrow. But as you walk toward the administration building, you feel the subtle shift from work self to private self beginning. Soon you'll leave the factory gates and, despite the system's attempts to blur the boundaries between work and personal life, you'll step into a different role, as neighbour, family member, friend, individual. This separation isn't complete in Soviet society, where one's work identity carries significant weight in all aspects of life. But it's there. It's a quiet defiance, a small reclaiming of self in a system that demands so much. And with that, my friends, we conclude our journey through a day in the life of a Soviet citizen. From the communal chaos of Leningrad in the 50s to the slightly more private existence of Moscow in the 60s, it's clear that life under the Red Banner was a fascinating, frustrating, and often surprisingly human experience. What do you think? Did anything surprise you about daily life in the Soviet Union? Or perhaps something resonated with experiences in your own life, even in a completely different context? I'd love to hear your thoughts, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed this peek behind the Iron Curtain. Your support helps us continue to explore the hidden corners of history. Until next time, comrades, stay curious and appreciate your private bathrooms. Hello, dear listeners, or should I say, dear viewers, because I'm super curious. Where in the world are you watching this video from? Drop a comment below with your location and the time. It always blows my mind how people are falling asleep to my dulcet tones all over the globe. Oh, and while you're at it, give that like button a quick tap. You know, for good karma. Alright, Buckle up, buttercups, because tonight we're diving headfirst into the glorious, perplexing and utterly bonkers world of Victorian social rules. Trust me, these folks had some seriously bizarre ideas about proper behaviour that'll make your most awkward modern moments seem like a walk in the park. Or, rather, a very slow, deliberately paced, and heavily chaperoned walk in the park. So, imagine this. Congratulations, you've just woken up in London, circa 1850. Your eyes blink open to find yourself in a narrow iron bed frame. Forget your memory foam mattress. This one's stuffed with horsehair. Slightly prickly, slightly lumpy, like sleeping on a grumpy hedgehog. The room is chilly. Really chilly. The fire you fell asleep to has died down to glowing embers, leaving just enough light to make out the shadowy, bulky wardrobe, the washstand with its ceramic basin, and a dressing table with a tiny smudged mirror. Outside, you hear the distant clatter of iron-rimmed carriage wheels on cobblestones, a dog barks, and the air. Oh, the air. It smells of coal smoke. Always coal smoke in London. It seeps in through every crack, under every door, through every window frame, mixing with the faint scent of bergamot oil from the perfume bottle on your dressing table. That sharp, citrusy smell everyone's dabbing on these days. The sheets around you are cotton, not particularly soft, but at least they're clean. And your nightgown? Flannel, buttoned right up to your chin. Good heavens, imagine someone seeing your neck or wrists while you're sleeping. The scandal. On the table beside your bed sits a small bell. You reach for it and give it a tentative ring. Almost immediately you hear footsteps on the stairs, and your maid, Mary, appears at the door, already fully dressed despite the ungodly hour. "Good morning, miss," she says with a small curtsy. "Shall I draw the curtains?" Without waiting for your answer, she crosses to the window and pulls back heavy velvet drapes, letting in the weak, grey London daylight. The glass is smeared with soot from the countless chimneys belching smoke into the air. "What would you like to wear today, miss?" Mary asks, moving to the wardrobe and opening it to reveal an array of dresses, each more elaborate than the last. And here, my friends, is where your crash course in Victorian social rules truly begins. Because what you wear, how you speak, how you walk, who you talk to, when you talk to them, and basically everything else you do today will be governed by the most complex unwritten social code humans have ever created. The Victorians were essentially playing life on expert mode. One wrong move, and boom, social disgrace. You have a morning call with Mrs. Hartley at 11, Mary reminds you, as she selects a day dress in a deep blue, and then tea with your cousin Emily at 4 o'clock. Now, these morning calls are your first head-scratcher. Despite the name, they never, ever happen in the morning. Morning calls take place between 3 and 5 in the afternoon. I know it makes zero sense, but call them afternoon calls, and people will look at you like you've lost your mind. Oh, and they last exactly 15 minutes. Not 14, not 16, 15. And you better have a pocket watch to time yourself, because overstaying is considered extremely rude. Mary helps you into your clothes, which, let me tell you, is a whole process. First, the chemise, basically a long cotton slip, then the corset. Oh boy, the corset. Mary puts it around your waist and starts pulling the laces tighter. Tighter, you gasp, remembering that a proper Victorian lady is supposed to have a waist you can span with your hands. "Yes, miss," Mary says, yanking harder until you can barely breathe, your ribs shifting slightly, your lungs only expanding about halfway. This, my dear, is fashion. Next come the petticoats. 1, 2, 3 of them, each adding a layer of bulk to your lower half. Then the crinoline, a cage-like structure made of steel hoops that makes your skirt bell out around you like a giant lampshade. Finally, the dress goes over it all, with its tight bodice and enormous skirt. By the time you're done, you're wearing about 15 pounds of clothing. Mary does your hair, pulling it back severely from your face and arranging it in a neat bun at the nape of your neck. No flyaways allowed. Everything controlled. Everything proper. "Will you be wearing gloves or mittens today, miss?" Mary asks, holding up both options. "Gloves," you say, remembering that a proper Victorian lady never, ever shows her bare hands in public. Ever. Your hands should remain mysteriously concealed at all times, like some kind of weird, hand-based modesty rule. As Mary helps you with your gloves, you remember another cardinal rule: no perfume. Queen Victoria herself has declared that the heavy, musky perfumes of the previous era are vulgar. Instead, you dab a little lemon and bergamot oil on your handkerchief, just enough to smell clean, not enough to suggest you're trying to seduce anyone with your scandalous scent. Fully dressed, you make your way downstairs for breakfast. The house is coming alive around you. Servants scurry about, dusting, sweeping, polishing. The cook has been up since 5 a.m. preparing the morning meal. In the dining room, your father sits at the head of the table, newspaper in hand. Your mother is at the other end, already writing correspondence. They're both fully dressed because Victorians wouldn't dream of appearing at breakfast in anything resembling casual clothes. "Good morning," you say, taking your seat. Your father lowers his newspaper just enough to nod at you, then raises it again. Public displays of affection, even between family members, are not the Victorian way. No hugs, no kisses on the cheek. Breakfast is substantial: eggs, bacon, kidneys, toast, porridge. Victorians eat a lot at breakfast. It's their biggest meal of the day. You pick at yours, your corset making it impossible to take more than tiny bites. "Remember, Jane," your mother says, not looking up from her letter. "Mrs. Hartley's daughter has just become engaged. Be sure to congratulate her, but don't ask any details about the wedding. That would be presumptuous." You nod, making a mental note. This is typical of the invisible rulebook that governs Victorian society. You must acknowledge important life events, but never appear too interested in them. Curiosity is vulgar. After breakfast, you have a few hours before your morning call. You decide to work on your needlepoint, a suitably feminine pursuit. Idle hands are the devil's workshop after all, and a proper Victorian lady is never idle. You sit by the window in the drawing room, stitching a pattern of flowers onto a piece of linen. Your mother joins you, taking up her own needlework. "I saw Mrs. Fairchild yesterday," she says casually. "Her son has returned from university." You keep your eyes on your stitching, even though your heart beats a little faster. Thomas Fairchild. You danced with him at a ball last season before he went away to Oxford. He had kind eyes and didn't step on your feet, which, frankly, puts him ahead of most of the young men you've danced with. "How nice," you say, your voice carefully neutral. "She mentioned he asked after you," your mother continues, watching your reaction closely. You feel your cheeks warm, but keep your expression composed. "Did he? That's very civil of him." Your mother smiles slightly, satisfied with your restrained response. Showing too much interest in a young man would be improper. The game of Victorian courtship is all about pretending you're not playing it. At precisely 11:15, you put on your bonnet, gloves, and cloak, and set out with your mother for Mrs. Hartley's house. You carry a small card case containing your visiting cards, little pieces of paper with your name printed on them. These are essential to the ritual of morning calls. Mrs. Hartley lives just a few streets away, but walking too quickly would be unladylike. You adopt the proper Victorian lady's pace. Small steps, back straight, eyes modestly downcast. Your enormous skirt swings as you walk, occasionally threatening to knock over small children or dogs who get too close. People pass you on the street. Men tip their hats. You acknowledge them with the slightest nod, never making eye contact with strangers. A gentleman would never speak to a lady he hasn't been formally introduced to, and a lady would certainly never speak to a strange gentleman. You arrive at Mrs. Hartley's at precisely 11 o'clock. Punctuality is crucial. Being early is as bad as being late. Both suggest you don't have enough engagements to fill your day, which would be embarrassing. The butler answers the door. You hand him your visiting cards, one from you and one from your mother. He takes them on a small silver tray and shows you into the drawing room, where Mrs. Hartley and her daughter Charlotte are waiting. Everyone curtsies. No one hugs or kisses cheeks. Physical contact is kept to an absolute minimum. "How kind of you to call," Mrs. Hartley says, gesturing for you to sit down. You arrange yourself carefully on a small sofa, mindful of your enormous skirt. Sitting gracefully in a crinoline is an art form. You must perch right on the edge of your seat to accommodate the steel cage around your lower half. "We were so pleased to hear your happy news," your mother says to Charlotte, who blushes appropriately. "Thank you," Charlotte murmurs, eyes downcast. "Mr. Edwards is very kind." And that's it. That's all the information you're going to get about Charlotte's engagement. Not what her fiancé is like, not when the wedding will be, not how they met or whether she loves him. Those questions would be prying, and Victorians do not pry. The conversation moves on to safe topics. The weather, cloudy but not raining. Recent sermons at church, uplifting but not too long. And a musical performance you all attended, accomplished but not showy. Everything is described in the most moderate terms possible. Strong opinions are for the lower classes. After exactly 15 minutes, your mother gives an almost imperceptible nod. That's your cue. You both stand up. "It was so lovely to see you," Mrs. Hartley says, also standing. More curtsies, more pleasantries, then you're back out on the street. Morning call successfully completed. "That went well," your mother says as you walk home. "Charlotte looked well, didn't she?" "Very well." You agree. In Victorian conversation, well is the highest praise one can give. Back at home, you have a light luncheon, then spend the afternoon reading an improving book. Nothing too exciting or romantic, of course. Novels that stir the emotions are considered potentially dangerous for young ladies. At 4 o'clock, you have tea with your cousin Emily, who comes to your house. The ritual is similar to the morning call, but slightly less formal since Emily is family. You still maintain perfect posture, still speak in measured tones about appropriate subjects, still avoid anything that might be considered gossip. After Emily leaves, you have a few hours before dinner. You practice the piano for exactly 1 hour, enough to maintain your skills without suggesting that you harbour inappropriate ambitions of becoming a professional musician. Dinner is at 7 p.m, a relatively informal family meal since you're not entertaining guests. Still, you change into a different dress, slightly fancier than your day dress, but not as elaborate as an evening gown. Victorians change clothes multiple times a day, each outfit precisely calibrated to the specific social context. At the dinner table, conversation is polite, but not particularly personal. Your father discusses business matters with your brother. Your mother mentions charity work she's involved with. You listen attentively, occasionally offering a gentle opinion when directly addressed. After dinner, you all retire to the drawing room. Your brother and father might have brandy and cigars in the study, but ladies don't drink anything stronger than sherry, and they certainly don't smoke. Instead, you play the piano for the family or work on your needlepoint some more. By 10 o'clock, everyone is ready for bed. Another day of Victorian propriety successfully navigated. As Mary helps you undress, removing the layers one by one, you finally feel like you can breathe again when the corset comes off. "Will you need anything else, miss?" Mary asks, as she helps you into your nightgown. "No thank you, Mary," you say, settling into bed with a small sigh of relief. She curtsies and leaves, taking the oil lamp with her. The room falls into darkness, except for the faint glow from the banked fire in the grate. You lie there thinking about the day, all those rules, all that restraint. It's exhausting. But there's also something almost comforting about knowing exactly what's expected of you at every moment. As you drift towards sleep, you wonder what tomorrow will bring in this world of rigid propriety and hidden feelings. You'll need to navigate a formal dinner party, which means a whole new set of rules to remember. But that can wait until morning. For now, you let the distant sounds of the city lull you toward dreams. Your last thought before sleep takes you is of Thomas Fairchild and his kind eyes. In this world where so much is restrained and controlled, even the smallest connection feels significant. You wonder if you'll see him soon, and what complicated dance of social rules you'll have to perform if you do. Outside, fog rolls in from the Thames, wrapping the city in its damp embrace. Gas lamps cast hazy halos of light on the cobblestone streets. A carriage passes, wheels clattering. A night watchman calls the hour, and all across London, behind the prim facades of countless houses, Victorians lie in their beds, constrained by their social rules, even in their dreams. Morning arrives with the sound of Mary drawing back your curtains again. The pale winter sun barely penetrates the ever-present London fog. Another day of Victorian propriety awaits you. "Good morning, miss," Mary says, placing a cup of hot chocolate on your bedside table. "It's going to be a busy day." You sip the chocolate as Mary lays out your morning dress. Today is indeed important. You're attending a formal dinner party at the Fairchilds' house. Yes, those Fairchilds. Thomas will be there. The morning passes in a blur of preparations. Your mother insists you practice piano for 2 hours instead of the usual one. "The Fairchilds may ask you to play," she explains. "Mrs. Fairchild mentioned their new pianoforte. It would be rude to decline." Another Victorian rule to remember: never refuse a direct request to demonstrate an accomplishment, but also never appear too eager to show off. It's a delicate balance. After lunch, you take a light walk in the nearby park with your mother. The crisp winter air is actually cleaner than inside most homes, where coal fires fill the rooms with a fine layer of soot. Ladies stroll along the pathways, nodding politely to acquaintances. Gentlemen tip their hats as they pass. "Remember," your mother says quietly as you walk, "at dinner you'll be seated according to rank. Don't appear surprised by your placement, whatever it may be." You nod. The Victorian dinner table is a battlefield of social hierarchy. The most important male guest sits to the right of the hostess. The most important female guest sits to the right of the host. Everyone else is arranged in descending order of social importance. Being seated near the bottom of the table is a clear message about your status. Back at home, preparation for the evening begins in earnest. A formal dinner party requires your finest appearance. Mary runs a bath for you, adding a few drops of rose oil to the water. The bathroom is chilly despite the small fire burning in the grate. You bathe quickly, shivering as you step out onto the cold floor. Then the dressing begins. Tonight requires full evening dress. Your corset is laced even tighter than usual. Your crinoline is wider. Your gown is pale blue silk with delicate lace trim. The neckline is lower than your day dress, showing your collarbones and a hint of shoulder. The maximum amount of skin a respectable unmarried woman can display. Your hair's arranged in an elaborate style, with small silk flowers pinned among the curls. A light dusting of rice powder on your face gives you the fashionable pale complexion. No rouge, though. Only actresses and women of questionable virtue wear obvious makeup. "You look beautiful, miss," Mary says, stepping back to admire her work. You barely recognise yourself in the mirror. You look exactly like a proper Victorian young lady should. Poised, controlled, elegant. Your waist impossibly small, your skirt ridiculously wide. Fashion is suffering, but fashion must be obeyed. Your father has arranged for a carriage to take you to the Fairchilds. It's a cold night, and walking would ruin your carefully arranged appearance. Plus, arriving in a carriage rather than on foot displays your family's prosperity. The carriage pulls up outside a large townhouse on one of London's most fashionable streets. Lights blaze from every window. A footman in livery opens the carriage door and helps you step down. Inside, the house is warm and bright. Gaslighting, the latest modern convenience, illuminates the entrance hall. A maid takes your cloak, revealing your evening finery. The butler announces your family as you enter the drawing room: Mr. and Mrs. Wilson and Miss Jane Wilson. All heads turn. You feel your cheeks warm, but keep your expression composed as you make your curtsies to Mr. and Mrs. Fairchild. And there, standing beside his mother, is Thomas. He's taller than you remember, his evening clothes emphasizing his broad shoulders. He bows perfectly, not too deep, which would seem obsequious, but not too shallow, which would be disrespectful. "Miss Wilson," he says, his voice deeper than you recall. "How pleasant to see you again." "Mr. Fairchild," you reply, your voice carefully modulated. "I trust Oxford agrees with you." The smallest of smiles crosses his face. It does, thank you, though London has attractions that Oxford cannot claim. Is he flirting with you? It's so hard to tell with Victorian men. Their compliments are buried under layers of propriety. More guests arrive, the drawing room fills with the murmur of polite conversation. Everyone stands. Sitting before dinner would suggest eagerness to eat, which would be vulgar. You notice Charlotte Hartley and her fiancé, Mr. Edwards, across the room. They stand a respectable distance apart. No touching, no meaningful glances. To the casual observer, they might not even be engaged. When all the guests have arrived, the butler announces that dinner is served. Now comes the complex choreography of entering the dining room. The host, Mr. Fairchild, offers his arm to the highest-ranking female guest. The highest-ranking male guest offers his arm to the hostess. Everyone else pairs off according to status, forming a procession into the dining room. You find yourself paired with a middle-aged gentleman you've never met before. Thomas, you notice, is escorting an elderly lady with an elaborate turban of fabric on her head. The dining room dazzles with crystal, silver, and candlelight. The table gleams with polished silver and fine china. Each place setting has an intimidating array of utensils: fish forks, soup spoons, dessert spoons, multiple knives, and more. Using the wrong utensil would be a social catastrophe. You're seated about halfway down the table, not at the bottom, which is encouraging, but not near the top either. Thomas is on the opposite side, several seats away. During a Victorian dinner, you primarily converse with the gentleman seated to your left and right, never across the table. The gentleman to your right turns to you. "I understand you're acquainted with my nephew, Miss Wilson. Charles Pembroke, I believe. You danced at Lady Hamilton's ball last season." You search your memory. Yes, you did dance with a Mr. Pembroke. He stepped on your feet 3 times and talked exclusively about his horse. "Yes, indeed," you say pleasantly. "Mr. Pembroke is an accomplished dancer." A small white lie in the service of social harmony. The dinner progresses through multiple courses: soup, fish, meat, game, dessert, each with its own set of serving rituals and appropriate utensils. You carefully take small bites, chewing quietly. A lady is never seen to eat heartily, even if she's starving. Conversation around the table is carefully balanced between interesting and inoffensive. Politics, religion, money, and anything personal are strictly avoided. Instead, people discuss recent theatrical performances, exhibitions at the Royal Academy, the weather, and travels to acceptable destinations like Italy or France. You notice Thomas watching you from across the table. When your eyes meet, he quickly looks away. In this world of rigid social rules, even eye contact can be loaded with meaning. After dessert comes the most gendered ritual of the Victorian dinner party. Mrs. Fairchild catches the eye of the highest-ranking female guest and rises from her seat. This is the signal for all the ladies to leave the dining room, leaving the gentlemen to their port and cigars. You follow the procession of women back to the drawing room. This gender segregation serves multiple purposes in Victorian society. It allows the men to discuss male topics like business and politics. It gives women a chance to use the chamber pot if needed, a necessity given the voluminous skirts that make frequent bathroom trips difficult. And it preserves the fiction that ladies are too delicate to be exposed to cigars and strong drink. In the drawing room, the women arrange themselves in conversational groups. Mrs. Fairchild ensures that Charlotte and her fiancé's mother are seated together, a sign of approval for the upcoming marriage. "Will you play for us, Miss Wilson?" Mrs. Fairchild asked, gesturing to the pianoforte in the corner. Ah, here it is, the dreaded request. You can't refuse, but you also can't appear too eager. "If you wish it, Mrs. Fairchild," you say modestly, "though I'm sure there are more accomplished musicians present." "Nonsense," Mrs. Fairchild says. "We've all heard of your talent." You move to the piano, arranging your enormous skirt as best you can on the small bench. You play a piece by Mozart, technically challenging enough to show skill, but not so flamboyant as to seem showy. You keep your posture perfect, your face composed in a slight smile. No grimacing or swaying with the music. That would be considered overly emotional. When you finish, the ladies applaud politely. You acknowledge their approval with a modest nod, then return to your seat. Your hands are trembling slightly, but no one notices. A proper Victorian lady never shows nervousness. About half an hour after the ladies left the dining room, the gentlemen joined them. The smell of cigars clings to their clothes. Some have high colour in their cheeks from the port. The older men settle into chairs, while the younger ones circulate among the ladies. Thomas makes his way to your side, stopping to exchange pleasantries with several other guests first, to avoid appearing too eager. "I enjoyed your performance, Miss Wilson," he says, when he finally reaches you. "Mozart, was it not?" "Yes," you reply. "His sonata in C major." "You play with great feeling," he says, then adds quickly, "but appropriate restraint, of course." You smile slightly. "Thank you, Mr. Fairchild. I understand you're studying classics at Oxford." And so begins the Victorian version of flirtation, a carefully controlled conversation about impersonal topics, with real meaning hidden between the lines. You discuss books, nothing too romantic, music, nothing too passionate, and art, nothing too avant-garde. All the while, you're assessing each other. Is he intelligent? Is she well-read? Would our temperaments suit? You notice Mrs. Fairchild watching you both with a satisfied expression. Mothers are the primary architects of Victorian matches. No doubt she invited your family tonight specifically to throw you and Thomas together. After what seems like only a few minutes, but is actually nearly half an hour, Thomas reluctantly excuses himself. "I should speak with Miss Hartley and offer my congratulations on her engagement," he says. "Of course," you reply, hiding your disappointment. "It was pleasant conversing with you, Mr. Fairchild." He bows slightly. "The pleasure was mine, Miss Wilson." As he walks away, your mother appears at your side. "He seems quite attentive," she murmurs. "Does he?" you say, pretending you hadn't noticed. Your mother isn't fooled. "Don't appear too interested, Jane. Nothing scares away a potential suitor faster than an eager young lady." The evening continues with more music, some card games, and continuous circulation of guests around the room. Everyone is careful to speak to everyone else. No one stays in one conversation too long. The appearance of social harmony is paramount. At precisely 11 o'clock, the first guests begin to leave. This signals that it's acceptable for others to depart as well. The Victorians have strict rules even about when to end a party. Your father catches your mother's eye, and she nods slightly. Time to go. You make your farewells to the hosts, thanking them properly for their hospitality. Thomas is nearby and bows to you one last time. "Until we meet again, Miss Wilson," he says softly. "Good evening, Mr. Fairchild," you reply, your voice giving away nothing of your inner thoughts. Outside, your carriage is waiting. As you settle into the seat, you finally allow yourself a small sigh of relief. The evening went well. No social missteps, and Thomas seemed genuinely interested in you. "A successful evening," your father declares as the carriage pulls away. This is high praise from him indeed. "Your mother agrees," your mother says. "Mrs. Fairchild mentioned they're hosting a small musical evening next week. We're to receive an invitation." Your heart beats a little faster. Another opportunity to see Thomas. Back at home, Mary helps you undress, carefully hanging up your evening gown and putting away your jewellery. Your hair, so elaborately arranged, tumbles down your back as she removes the pins. "Did you enjoy yourself, miss?" Mary asks as she brushes out your hair. "It was a pleasant evening," you say, maintaining your composure even with your lady's maid. Servants observe everything and gossip among themselves. Any show of excitement about Thomas might reach his household through the servants' network. When Mary leaves, you sit at your dressing table for a moment, looking at your reflection. Behind your composed expression, your mind is racing. Did Thomas really seek you out specifically? What did his mother's watchful gaze mean? Will he call on you, or must you wait to meet again at the musical evening? Dating in the Victorian era is like playing chess while blindfolded. Every move matters, but half the time you don't even know you're making a move, and the stakes are high. Your entire future happiness depends on making a good match. You move to the window, pulling back the curtains slightly to look out at the foggy London night. Gas lamps create halos of light in the mist. A lone, handsome cab clatters past on the cobblestones. Somewhere out there, Thomas Fairchild is perhaps thinking of you too. But in this world of rigid propriety and hidden feelings, who can tell? You'll have to wait and see what the next social encounter brings, and what new rules you'll need to navigate. Your next encounter with Thomas Fairchild comes sooner than expected. The very next day, in fact. You're reading in the front parlour, half-heartedly turning pages of a suitably improving book about botany, when Mary appears at the door. "Mr. Thomas Fairchild is here, miss," she announces. "He's asking if you and your mother are receiving visitors." Your heart jumps, but your face remains perfectly composed. "Please tell him we are, Mary, and inform my mother." A proper Victorian young lady is never, ever left alone with a gentleman caller. Your mother must be present for the entire visit. Even stepping out of the room for a minute would be scandalous. Mary curtsies and disappears. You have about 30 seconds to prepare yourself. You check your hair in the small mirror above the fireplace, straighten your posture, and pick up your book again, arranging yourself to look naturally occupied. When he enters, the door opens, and there's Thomas, looking even more handsome in daylight. His formal morning clothes fit him perfectly. Dark coat, perfectly tied cravat, polished boots. He's carrying his top hat and gloves. A gentleman always removes his hat indoors, but keeps his gloves on until seated. "Miss Wilson," he says, bowing, "I hope I find you well today." Quite well, thank you, Mr. Fairchild, you reply, setting your book aside and gesturing to a chair. Please be seated. My mother will join us momentarily. Thomas sits, finally removing his gloves and placing them inside his hat. This is the Victorian equivalent of getting comfortable. I enjoyed the evening at your parents' home last night, you say, keeping your tone pleasant but not overly warm. As did I, he replies. My mother was particularly impressed with your musical performance. Before you can respond, your mother enters the room. Thomas immediately stands. A gentleman always rises when a lady enters. Mr. Fairchild, your mother says, smiling. What a pleasant surprise. Thomas bows again. Mrs. Wilson, I hope I'm not calling at an inconvenient time. Not at all, your mother assures him, taking a seat on the sofa beside you. Now the real dance begins. I've come to extend an invitation, Thomas says. My mother is hosting a small musical evening next Tuesday. She hopes Miss Wilson and your good selves will be able to attend. Ah, so that's why he's here. Not just to see you, but as his mother's messenger. Still, he could have sent a servant with a written invitation. The fact that he came personally means something. How kind, your mother says. We would be delighted to accept. Excellent, Thomas says, his eyes flickering to you. My mother also mentioned she would be grateful if Miss Wilson might consider performing. Your rendition of Mozart last night was much admired. Now you understand completely. Mrs. Fairchild wants to show you off to her friends. You're being evaluated as a potential daughter-in-law. I would be happy to play, you say modestly, though I'm sure your mother has engaged more accomplished musicians. Thomas shakes his head. None that I'm aware of. Your talent would be the highlight of the evening. Is he actually complimenting you directly? That's borderline scandalous in Victorian terms. Your mother smoothly steps in. My daughter practices diligently, Mr. Fairchild. We're grateful for the opportunity to share the fruits of her hard work. The conversation continues with this kind of formal back and forth, covering mutual acquaintances, upcoming social events. Thomas is careful to address most of his remarks to your mother, only occasionally looking at you directly. This is proper Victorian form. After exactly 15 minutes, the prescribed length for a morning call, Thomas stands. I've taken enough of your time, Mrs. Wilson, Miss Wilson, he says. I'll convey your acceptance to my mother. She'll be most pleased. Your mother rings for Mary, who appears to show Thomas out. He bows to both of you, his eyes lingering on you for just a moment longer than strictly necessary. When the door closes behind him, your mother turns to you with a satisfied expression. Well, she says, it seems the Fairchilds have taken an interest in you. You try to look only mildly pleased. Mrs. Fairchild is very kind to include us in her musical evening. Your mother gives you a knowing look. It wasn't Mrs. Fairchild who just called on us, was it? Before you can respond, the bell rings again. Mary appears moments later. Miss Charlotte Hartley and Mrs. Hartley, ma'am, she announces. More visitors. The morning call circuit is in full swing. Charlotte enters with her mother, both dressed in the height of fashion. Charlotte looks radiant. Engagement agrees with her, apparently. After the usual pleasantries, Charlotte leans forward slightly, her eyes bright with excitement. Have you heard about Mrs. Pembroke? She asks in a low voice. Your mother raises an eyebrow. What about her? Mrs. Hartley clucks her tongue. And that, my dear friends, is where we leave our intrepid Victorian heroine for now. Who knows what scandalous gossip awaits, or what new rules she'll accidentally break in her quest for love and acceptance. What do you think of Jane's adventures so far? Would you survive a day in Victorian England, or would you commit a social faux pas before breakfast? Let me know in the comments. Hello, aspiring time traveller. Get ready to ditch your memory foam, because we're about to plunge headfirst into a world where everything you thought you knew about love and relationships gets gloriously, hilariously, and surprisingly turned on its head. Forget everything your history teacher told you about ancient civilizations being stuffy and repressed. Ancient Egypt. They were basically the free-spirited, open-minded rebels of the ancient world. Welcome to ancient Egypt, where normal is backwards. When the Greek historian Herodotus first stepped off that boat onto Egyptian soil, he basically lost his mind. I mean, imagine visiting a place where everything you thought was normal is completely backwards. That's exactly what Egypt was for him. He straight up accused them of reversing the ordinary practices of mankind. Marriage, love, public affection, all of it seemed upside down to this poor guy. And honestly, he wasn't entirely wrong. The way Egyptians approached relationships was pretty wild compared to other ancient civilizations. You see, the Greeks kept their women practically locked away, shrouded in mystery, barely allowed out of the house. Egyptian women, on the other hand, they were out and about, running businesses, making deals, and generally living their best lives with a shocking amount of freedom. It was like a cultural slap in the face for poor old Herodotus, who probably went home and immediately wrote a sternly worded letter to his local philosopher about the moral decay of the world. Oh, and if you're enjoying these stories, I'd really appreciate a like or subscribe. It helps me know you're out there, listening. I'm super curious where you're all listening from, so drop a comment with your location and what time it is there. It always blows my mind how people are falling asleep to this all over the world, from a cozy evening in Bucharest to a bright morning on the other side of the planet. Knowing that you're drifting off to tales of ancient romance makes my day. Alright, find that cozy spot, take a nice slow breath and just let your body sink into whatever you're lying on. We're heading back to ancient Egypt, so congratulations. You just woke up in the land of pharaohs, pyramids, and surprisingly progressive relationships. The first thing that hits you is the heat. Not the gentle warmth of modern central heating, but that bone-deep desert heat that makes your skin prickle with sweat almost instantly, as if your pores are staging a tiny protest. You're lying on a reed mat that crackles beneath you, a far cry from your memory foam mattress back home. Through the small window cut high into the mud brick wall, you can see the sky is just beginning to lighten, turning that distinctive Egyptian blue that artists have tried to capture for centuries, a blue so intense it almost hums. The smells around you are just as intense. There's the earthy scent of the Nile, a muddy sweetness that seems to permeate everything, clinging to the very air. Closer, you catch whiffs of cooking fires starting up outside, the tantalizing aroma of bread baking somewhere nearby, promising a simple but satisfying breakfast. And then there's another, more exotic smell, the distinct aroma of kefi incense burning in a small copper dish near the door. It's a mixture of myrrh, frankincense, and raisins, a concoction that was supposed to please the gods and purify the home, though you suspect it also did a pretty good job of masking the less pleasant odours of village life. You sit up, and your bare feet touch the packed earth floor, surprisingly cool against your skin despite the growing heat of the day. Outside, you hear voices calling to each other, the rhythmic clatter of pottery as someone prepares for the day's tasks, and the distant bray of a donkey pulling a cart, the soundtrack of ancient morning life. Life is already bustling, and the sun has barely kissed the horizon. Welcome to Egypt. The year is... well, Egyptians wouldn't recognize our calendar system, but let's say it's around 1400 BCE, during what we now call the New Kingdom. This was the era of legendary pharaohs like Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, and the formidable Hatshepsut, a woman who ruled Egypt as a king, beard and all. You're about to learn something pretty fascinating about this place. Love and marriage here aren't what you'd expect at all. Now, if you're lying there thinking about all those History Channel documentaries about Egyptian pharaohs marrying their sisters and weird incest stuff, I'm going to stop you right there. Yes, royal marriages were often between siblings, a way to keep the royal bloodline pure and consolidated power within the ruling family. But that was basically just for the royal family, the top 1% of the 1%. Regular folks like you and me? Totally different story. For most ancient Egyptians, marriage was surprisingly practical, yet deeply personal. A fascinating mix of business arrangement and genuine affection that would honestly put some modern relationships to shame. They weren't afraid to blend the pragmatic with the passionate. So, here's the first thing that would have blown Herodotus's mind, and probably yours too. Marriage in ancient Egypt wasn't a religious ceremony at all. In fact, there wasn't even a ceremony. No white dress, no walking down the aisle, no "you may now kiss the bride," no awkward speeches from distant relatives. None of that pomp and circumstance. You shift slightly on your reed mat, finding a more comfortable position, the sounds of the waking village continuing outside your window. Women talking as they head to the Nile for water, the cheerful laughter of children, the rhythmic scraping of dough being kneaded for the morning bread, a reassuring symphony of daily life. Basically, here's how Egyptian marriage worked. When a young man was ready, usually around 16 to 20 years old, he'd look for a partner. Girls were typically younger, often just after their first menses, around 12 to 14. Young by our standards? Sure. But when life expectancy was a grim 30 to 35 years for common folk, you didn't exactly have time to spend a decade finding yourself before settling down and producing heirs. Time was of the essence. You stretch and stand up, your joints cracking pleasantly, a little protest from your ancient body. Across the small room, a clay jar of water sits waiting. You dip a cloth into it and wipe the night sweat from your face and neck. The water is cool against your skin, a small mercy in this relentless heat. The most important thing for marriage wasn't love, at least not initially. It was stability. A man needed to have a job, some kind of income, his own house, a basic foundation for a family. Women weren't expected to bring financial stability to the marriage, but they did bring essential domestic skills and often a dowry of household items, things like linens, pottery, furniture, maybe even a few prized cooking implements. When families agreed on a match, and yes, parents usually had a major say, acting like ancient matchmakers, they'd draw up what was essentially a prenuptial agreement. This contract laid out what property each person brought into the marriage, and, crucially, what would happen to it if things didn't work out. Pretty modern, right? It showed a remarkable foresight for protecting women's assets. But here's where it gets really interesting. Once all the negotiations were done, there was no big ceremony, no priest blessing the union, no signatures on a marriage certificate. The woman simply gathered her belongings and moved into the man's house. That's it. That was the whole wedding. The moment she crossed his threshold with her stuff, they were considered married, as legally binding as any modern ceremony. Outside your window, you notice a young woman carrying a small wooden chest toward a house down the street. Following her are two older women with baskets of linens, pottery, and other household goods. You're witnessing exactly this. A new bride moving her possessions into her husband's home, the beginning of a marriage, ancient Egyptian style. The young woman looks nervous but excited, clutching a small carved bird in her free hand, perhaps a good luck charm. The neighbours have come out to watch and call good wishes, their voices blending into a cheerful murmur. There's a festive atmosphere, even without a formal ceremony. A few musicians have appeared, playing simple reed flutes and small hand drums, their melodies weaving through the morning air. The rhythm is hypnotic, a gentle pulse that seems to match the beating of your own heart as you watch this intimate slice of history unfolding before you. Your body feels heavy and comfortable as you lean against the cool mud brick wall, observing this scene from across the millennia. Now, you might be thinking, this all sounds pretty transactional. And yeah, there was definitely a practical aspect to it. Marriage was about alliances, producing heirs, and creating a stable household unit in a challenging environment. But here's the thing that made Egyptian marriage different from a lot of other ancient cultures, and truly revolutionary for its time. Women had rights, like serious rights. Rights that women in Greece or Rome or basically anywhere else wouldn't get for thousands of years. For starters, that prenuptial agreement we talked about. It protected the woman's property. Whatever she brought into the marriage remained hers. The husband couldn't touch it. She could also inherit property from her parents independently of her husband, and she could buy and sell property without his permission. This meant an Egyptian woman could be a landowner, a businesswoman, an independent economic force, a stark contrast to her counterparts in other ancient societies, where women were often legally considered property themselves. You decide to follow the small wedding procession, your bare feet padding softly on the packed earth of the street, the fine dust rising slightly with each step. The heat is building as the sun climbs higher, and you can feel sweat beginning to trickle down your back, a constant companion in this climate. The smell of bread baking, now mingled with the tantalizing aroma of roasting fish, makes your stomach rumble. You haven't eaten yet today, and the thought of food is a powerful motivator. The crowd turns down another street, a narrow alleyway that provides some blessed shade, and you follow, drawn by the music and the contagious cheer of the celebration. You feel your shoulders relax a bit as you escape the direct sun, a small moment of relief. What's really wild is that Egyptian women could divorce their husbands just like that. If things weren't working out, a woman could simply leave, taking all her original property plus a divorce settlement that was usually about 1/3 of the marital assets. In a world where women were basically considered property themselves in most places, this was revolutionary. Imagine Herodotus's face when he heard that. Of course, men could divorce their wives too, but they'd have to pay up, and either way, any children from the marriage would stay with the mother. The father might provide some support, but custody defaulted to mom. Again, mind-blowing for the ancient world. This legal framework suggests a society that placed significant value on the well-being and autonomy of women, a concept almost unheard of elsewhere. The procession has stopped at a modest but well-kept house, its mud brick walls adorned with fresh paint in vibrant blues and reds. The young bride is being welcomed by her new husband, a man perhaps a few years older than her, his face flushed with a mixture of nervousness and eagerness to please. He looks like he just won the lottery, which, in a way, he has. His friends are clapping him on the back, making jokes that make him blush even deeper. The bride's mother is wiping away tears, but they seem to be happy ones. Tears of pride and relief. You lean against a wall across the street, your body feeling pleasantly heavy as you observe this intimate moment, this simple beginning happening before you. This simple, ceremony-free wedding is the foundation of Egyptian family life, a bedrock of community and tradition. But the really interesting thing about Egyptian marriage wasn't just the legal stuff. It was the emotions. Despite marriages often being arranged for practical reasons, Egyptians actually valued romantic love a lot. It wasn't just a byproduct, it was an aspiration. You close your eyes for a moment, feeling the rough texture of the mud brick wall against your back, grounding you in this ancient moment, connecting you to the lives lived here thousands of years ago. When you open them again, the bride and groom are sharing a shy smile. Despite all the practical arrangements that brought them here, there's a genuine warmth between them, a spark of affection that promises something deeper. The evidence for love in ancient Egypt is everywhere once you start looking. Their poetry is full of it, passionate, romantic verses that could rival anything from Shakespeare to your favourite modern love song. Imagine hearing this. To hear your voice is pomegranate wine to me. I draw life from hearing it. Could I see you with every glance, it would be better for me than to eat or to drink. Beautiful, right? This kind of love poetry was incredibly popular, especially during the New Kingdom period. Egyptians loved to express their feelings about each other, and they weren't shy about physical affection either. They were surprisingly tactile. As you watch, the new husband takes his wife's hand and leads her into their home. The threshold moment, the actual marriage in Egyptian terms, has already happened, but this entrance together is clearly meaningful to them both, a symbolic step into their shared future. The crowd cheers, the musicians play more enthusiastically, and someone breaks out jars of beer to share around. You can almost taste the thick, slightly sweet Egyptian beer in the air. It was much heartier than our modern beers, more like a meal in a jar, often flavoured with dates or honey, and surprisingly nutritious. The celebration is getting livelier now, and you feel your own spirits lifting as you watch, a warmth spreading through you that has nothing to do with the sun. Now, here's another fascinating thing about Egyptian marriage. They believed it continued into the afterlife. Egyptians were obsessed with eternity, right? All those pyramids and mummies and elaborate tombs. Well, they thought a good marriage would last forever, literally. Couples were often buried together, or in adjoining tombs, with paintings showing them holding hands, embracing, sometimes even with their children around them, a beautiful tableau of eternal family life. That's why being a good spouse was so important. Nobody wanted to be stuck with a jerk for all eternity. This belief actually encouraged people to work on their relationships and treat each other well because, hey, till death do us part wasn't a thing. It was forever and ever, including the afterlife. It put a whole new spin on marital counselling. The wedding celebration is spreading now, with neighbours bringing out food to share. The scent of fresh bread, roasted fish from the Nile, and sweet honey cakes fills the air. Your stomach growls again, a polite but firm reminder that you still haven't eaten. A kind-looking older woman, her face lined with a lifetime of sun and smiles, notices you standing alone and gestures for you to join them. You hesitate. You're not exactly dressed in period-appropriate clothing. Your modern attire would be anachronistic, to say the least. But her smile is so welcoming that you find yourself moving forward anyway. She presses a piece of warm, fresh bread into your hand. It's denser than modern bread, with a nutty flavour from the coarse ground emmer wheat it's made from. The crust is perfectly crisp, the inside still steaming. It might be the most delicious thing you've ever tasted, or maybe it's just the magic of eating bread that was baked 3,400 years ago, a literal taste of history. Your body feels increasingly heavy and comfortable as you eat, the simple pleasure of good food and friendly company washing over you, a profound sense of peace. You find a spot to sit on a low stone wall, your muscles relaxing as you continue to observe the celebration, feeling fully immersed in this ancient moment. Love, lust and lotus flowers, the bedroom and beyond. Let's talk about what happened in the bedroom, because that's where things get really interesting, and probably where poor Herodotus truly needed a fainting couch. Unlike many ancient cultures, and honestly plenty of modern ones, Egyptians had a pretty healthy attitude towards sex. They saw it as a natural, normal part of life, not something shameful or solely for procreation. It was a source of pleasure, connection and joy. And this is where poor Herodotus really lost it. Egyptians were openly affectionate with each other. They held hands in public, embraced, and generally weren't shy about showing their feelings. This was shocking to Greeks like Herodotus, who lived in a society where women were basically kept secluded, veiled, and public displays of affection were a big no-no, considered scandalous. The music has shifted to a slower, more sensual rhythm. A few couples have begun dancing, their movements fluid and graceful. It's not the highly choreographed dancing of temple ceremonies, but something more natural and spontaneous, an expression of joy and connection. The newly married couple joins in, clearly a bit shy with each other still, but moving together with increasing confidence, their movements mirroring each other. You feel your own body swaying slightly to the rhythm, the weight of it pleasantly heavy against the stone wall where you sit. The bread sits warm in your stomach, and someone has handed you a small cup of beer. It's thick and rich, almost like a meal in itself, with a tangy sweetness that's nothing like modern beer. What's more, premarital sex wasn't taboo in ancient Egypt. There's no direct word for virgin in the ancient Egyptian language, which tells you a lot about their attitudes. Young people were expected to explore their sexuality before marriage. It wasn't stigmatized, especially for women. Can you imagine how revolutionary this would seem to Herodotus, or pretty much any other ancient civilization that prized female virginity above all else? Of course, once you were married, fidelity was important. Both husbands and wives were expected to be faithful to each other. Adultery was considered a serious offence, though it was defined somewhat differently for men and women. A married woman sleeping with anyone other than her husband was adultery. For men, sleeping with another man's wife was adultery, but having relations with an unmarried woman wasn't seen the same way. A bit of a double standard perhaps, but still more progressive than many contemporaries. The dance continues, growing more energetic. The bride and groom are laughing now, their initial shyness giving way to uninhibited joy. Their bodies move in harmony, already learning each other's rhythms, a beautiful and organic unfolding of their partnership. It's beautiful to watch this beginning of a partnership that will shape their lives. You sip your beer slowly, feeling the pleasant weight of your body against the wall, the gentle fatigue of the day settling into your muscles. The afternoon sun casts long shadows now, and the quality of light has changed that magical golden hour that photographers chase. A warm, soft glow that bathes the village in a benevolent light. Speaking of expectations in marriage, let's talk about children. Like most ancient societies, Egyptians wanted children. Lots of them. High infant mortality rates meant that having many children was the best way to ensure some survived to adulthood. But unlike other ancient cultures, Egyptians valued daughters almost as much as sons. Almost, but not quite. Sons were still preferred for carrying on the family name and taking care of parents in their old age, but daughters were valued too, seen as blessings and important members of the family unit. And female infanticide, the horrifying practice of killing unwanted baby girls, doesn't seem to have been a thing in Egypt, like it was in many other ancient cultures. Another point for ancient Egypt: the party is winding down now as evening approaches. The bride and groom have retreated into their new home, probably for some well-deserved rest, and neighbours are beginning to drift away, their conversations softening to murmurs. The musicians pack up their instruments, accepting thanks and payment from the bride's father, who looks utterly exhausted but content. You finish your beer, feeling pleasantly tired now, your limbs feeling heavy, your eyelids wanting to droop, a gentle invitation to sleep. The stone wall beneath you is still warm from the day's heat, comforting against your back, radiating a gentle warmth. But before we wrap up this first part of our journey into Egyptian love and marriage, there's one more fascinating aspect to explore: fertility and pregnancy. Egyptians had a weird but surprisingly effective method for determining if a woman was pregnant. She would pee on barley and emmer wheat seeds. If the barley sprouted, she was supposedly pregnant with a boy. If the emmer wheat sprouted, it would be a girl. If neither sprouted, she wasn't pregnant at all. Here's the crazy part. Modern scientists have tested this, and it actually works about 70% of the time for detecting pregnancy, though not for predicting gender. Turns out, pregnancy hormones in urine can indeed stimulate seed growth. They were accidentally onto something. The streets are quieter now as dusk falls. Oil lamps are being lit in windows, casting a warm, flickering glow, turning the mud brick houses into inviting beacons. The temperature is finally dropping, bringing blessed relief from the day's heat. A cool balm after the sun's relentless embrace. Your body feels increasingly heavy, sinking into a pleasant state of relaxation, your muscles loosening. Childbirth itself was dangerous business, of course. It was handled by midwives, not physicians, and was viewed as a natural process rather than a medical event. Women gave birth in a squatting position on special birthing bricks, surrounded by other women who would provide support and encouragement. Amulets and prayers to gods like Taweret, a hippo goddess who protected mothers and children, and Bes, a dwarf god who scared away evil spirits, were essential parts of the process, a blend of practical support and spiritual protection. If a child survived to age 5, they could generally look forward to a decent lifespan for the ancient world, about 30 to 35 years for common folks, and up to 50 to 60 years for the upper classes, who had better nutrition and didn't have to do hard physical labour. As darkness falls completely, the village grows quiet. Only the occasional bark of a dog or a distant laugh breaks the silence, a gentle hum of life. The stars above are brilliant in a way you never see in the modern world, unpolluted by electric lights. The Milky Way stretches across the sky like a river of stars, a cosmic mirror of their beloved Nile, and you can understand why the Egyptians saw the sky as a cosmic extension of their life-giving river. Your body feels incredibly heavy now, sinking into the ground beneath you, becoming one with the earth. Your breathing has slowed, becoming deep and regular. The sights and sounds of ancient Egypt are fading slightly as your awareness turns inward. You feel yourself drifting, floating on the current of history. The warm stone against your back, the lingering taste of bread and beer on your tongue, the distant music still echoing in your ears. All of it merges into a gentle cocoon of sensation. Tomorrow, we'll explore more about Egyptian love and marriage, the poetry they wrote to each other, the perfumes they wore to seduce their partners, the elaborate tombs they built to be together for eternity. But for now, you're here in this moment, your body relaxed and comfortable, your mind full of images of a world where love and marriage look very different from our own. The gentle weight of history settles around you, like a comfortable blanket. Your breathing deepens further. The stars wheel slowly overhead, the same stars that watched over ancient Egypt, that will continue to watch over our world long after we're gone. There's comfort in that continuity, that connection across time. Your limbs feel pleasantly heavy, your thoughts growing slower and more dreamlike. The sounds of the village have faded to almost nothing now, just the occasional rustle of palm fronds in the night breeze. Your body feels at peace, sinking deeper into relaxation with each breath as the story of ancient Egyptian love and marriage continues to unfold in your mind, a timeless tale of human connection. The morning sun climbs higher over the mud brick houses, casting long shadows across the narrow streets. You've woken early, your body attuned to the rhythms of this ancient world, where most activity happens before the brutal midday heat sets in. The air still holds a hint of coolness from the night, a fleeting memory of the cool darkness, but it's already evaporating like a dream upon waking, replaced by the creeping warmth of the new day. You stretch, feeling your muscles loosen pleasantly, the last vestiges of sleep melting away. The reed mat beneath you crackles as you sit up, that same earthy smell of the Nile hanging in the air, mingled now with the scent of cooking fires and fresh bread. Your stomach rumbles, a gentle reminder that it's time to find something to eat. Outside, women are already lined up at the communal bread ovens, chatting as they wait for their loaves to bake, their voices a soft murmur. Children dart between houses, playing some game involving small clay tokens, their laughter echoing cheerfully. A couple walks past, their hands casually intertwined, and you remember what you learned yesterday about Egyptian attitudes toward affection and marriage, a refreshing openness you hadn't expected. Speaking of marriage, there's something fascinating about the actual process of finding a spouse in ancient Egypt. While parents often had significant input, acting as wise guides, young people weren't completely without choice. And the courtship process? Honestly, it wasn't that different from modern dating in some ways. Minus the dating apps, of course. You make your way to a small market that's sprung up in a wider section of the street. Vendors have laid out mats with goods for sale, vibrant vegetables, glistening fish from the Nile, colourful beads, simple tools, woven baskets, a tapestry of daily life. You accept a piece of flatbread from a smiling woman who seems to recognise you from yesterday's wedding celebration, her eyes twinkling with warmth. The bread is still warm, slightly chewy, with a nutty flavour that speaks of a simpler, purer grain than modern wheat. As you chew slowly, savouring the unfamiliar yet comforting taste, you notice a young man and woman standing near a stall, selling flowers and perfume oils. They're not touching, but the way they look at each other speaks volumes, a silent language of burgeoning affection. He purchases a small blue lotus flower and offers it to her. She accepts it with a shy smile, bringing it to her nose to inhale its delicate fragrance, a gesture of quiet delight. You're witnessing Egyptian courtship in action. Blue lotus flowers were powerful symbols of love and fertility, associated with rebirth and the sun. They were also mildly psychoactive, producing feelings of relaxation and euphoria when brewed into wine or tea. Not exactly a box of chocolates, but definitely a romantic gesture, and one with added benefits. Your body feels comfortable and at ease as you lean against a mud brick wall, observing this moment across the centuries. The rough texture of the bricks against your back is strangely soothing, grounding you in this ancient reality, connecting you to the very fabric of this past world. Courtship in ancient Egypt involved gifts like flowers, jewellery, or love poems written on papyrus or pottery shards. Young people might meet at religious festivals or family gatherings, or be introduced by their parents. There were no formal dating rituals with specific rules, but there were definitely ways to show interest and attraction, a subtle dance of signals and gestures. The couple has moved on now, walking close together without quite touching, a delicate intimacy. They stop occasionally to look at other market stalls, clearly enjoying this simple time together before marriage might formalise their relationship and the responsibilities of family life set in. You finish your bread and decide to follow them at a respectful distance, curious about this glimpse into ancient romance. Your feet move quietly on the packed earth of the street, your body feeling pleasantly heavy and relaxed despite the growing heat of the day. What's particularly interesting about Egyptian courtship is how straightforward it could be. If a young man was interested in a woman, he might send a female relative as a go-between to speak with her mother. If the initial response was positive, gifts would follow, and eventually the families would meet to discuss more practical matters, laying the groundwork for a stable union. The young couple has stopped again, this time at a stall selling amulets and small statues of the gods. The man points to a figure of Hathor, the goddess of love, beauty and music, often depicted with cow horns and a sun disk. The woman nods, her eyes bright, and he purchases the small statuette for her. Their choices are significant. Hathor wasn't just any goddess, she was specifically associated with feminine love, sexuality and motherhood. By giving her a Hathor amulet, he's making his intentions pretty clear. He sees her as a potential wife and mother, and hopes for a loving, fruitful union. You shift your weight from one foot to the other, feeling the pleasant heaviness in your limbs. The heat is building now, and you notice most people are beginning to seek shade, retreating from the sun's intensifying gaze. The couple does the same, moving beneath an awning where a vendor sells cool drinks, offering a brief respite. Now let's talk about what made a person attractive in ancient Egypt, because it's both familiar and strange to modern eyes. Beauty standards existed, of course, but they were different from what you might expect. For women, the ideal was slim, but with full hips, suggesting fertility, small breasts, and a symmetrical face. Men were ideally broad-shouldered with narrow hips, strong arms, and defined legs. Both genders preferred clear skin, bright eyes, and healthy white teeth. Sound familiar so far? Pretty standard stuff, right? But here's where it gets interesting. Both men and women wore makeup. Heavy black kohl around their eyes, green malachite eyeshadow, rouge for the cheeks, and henna for the lips and nails. This wasn't just for beauty. The heavy eye makeup helped protect against the glare of the sun, and even had antibacterial properties that prevented eye infections. Beauty with a practical purpose. Your gaze drifts to a woman arranging jewellery at a nearby stall. Her eyes are dramatically lined with thick black kohl, the lines extending out toward her temples, giving her an almost otherworldly look. The effect is striking against her warm brown skin. You notice that almost everyone around you wears some form of eye makeup, regardless of gender or social status. It's as common as brushing your teeth today. The heat is becoming intense now. You can feel sweat beading on your forehead and upper lip. You wipe it away, wishing you had some of that kohl to protect your eyes from the glare. Your body feels heavy in the heat, your movements becoming slower, more deliberate, almost languid. Egyptians also placed huge importance on scent. Both men and women wore perfumes and scented oils. The wealthier you were, the more complex and expensive your fragrance would be. Common scents included lotus, myrrh, frankincense, cinnamon, and various flowers and resins. Some wealthy people would even wear cones of scented fat on top of their wigs at parties. As the fat melted in the heat, it would release fragrance and condition their skin. Kind of gross by modern standards, but incredibly effective in the dry Egyptian climate. Imagine walking into a party and having scented fat drip onto your shoulders. A true sensory experience, certainly. The couple you've been observing is now seated in the shade, drinking what looks like beer from small pottery cups. They're talking animatedly, their faces bright with interest in each other, their conversation flowing easily. You feel a small surge of happiness for these two people who've been dust for thousands of years. In this moment, they're alive and falling in love. A timeless tableau. Your own body feels increasingly heavy in the midday heat. Your movements are slower, you're breathing deeper, adapting to the ancient rhythm. You find a spot in the shade and sink down, your back against a cool wall, the physical sensations of ancient Egypt, the heat, the scents, the textures, overwhelming but strangely comforting. A full sensory immersion. The domestic scene an eternal embrace. Let's talk about what happened after marriage, when the bride had moved into her husband's home and their life together began. The transition could be difficult, especially for young brides leaving their families for the first time, a bittersweet parting. But Egyptian households often included extended family, so a new wife might find herself living with her husband's parents, siblings and their families too, a built-in support system and a bustling household. The daily routine for a married couple would depend largely on their social status. For most ordinary Egyptians, dawn meant the beginning of the workday. Men would head to the fields, construction sites, or workshops, while women typically managed the household. But here's an interesting thing. Women weren't confined to domestic duties. They could work outside the home as priestesses, mourners at funerals, dancers, musicians, or in various crafts. Some even worked alongside their husbands in family businesses or trades. Egyptian women had economic rights that wouldn't be seen again in Western civilization for thousands of years, a testament to their remarkably egalitarian society. Your eyelids feel heavy in the midday heat. Around you, the village has quieted as people retreat indoors for the hottest part of the day, a collective pause. The young couple has disappeared too, perhaps returning to their respective homes until evening brings cooler air and renewed energy. You decide to follow the local custom, finding a quiet, shaded spot to rest. Your body settles comfortably against the ground, the heat making your limbs feel wonderfully heavy and relaxed. Your breathing deepens naturally as you close your eyes, drifting into a light, ancient slumber. When you open them again, the quality of light has changed. The brutal midday sun has softened to the golden glow of late afternoon, painting everything in warm hues. You must have dozed off for a while, your body adapting to the Egyptian rhythm of work in the morning. Rest during the hottest hours and activity again in the evening. You rise, your muscles feeling loose and refreshed, the short rest revitalizing you. The village is coming alive again as people emerge from their homes, refreshed and ready for the cooler hours. The air is filled with conversation, laughter, the clatter of pottery being set out for the evening meal, a gentle reawakening. As the day cools, you notice more couples out walking together, talking and laughing. Public displays of affection were common and accepted in ancient Egypt. In tomb paintings and other artwork, spouses are often shown holding hands, embracing or with their arms around each other's shoulders or waists. This openness extended to their poetry as well. Love poems from ancient Egypt are surprisingly direct about desire and physical attraction. Here's one from the Chester Beatty papyrus that wouldn't feel out of place in a modern love letter. My heart flutters hastily when I think of my love, of you. It lets me not act sensibly. It leaps from its place. A truly universal sentiment. Your feet carry you toward the Nile, where people are gathering as the heat subsides. The great river gleams in the late afternoon light, a ribbon of molten gold winding through the green valley, reflecting the dying sun. Along its banks, couples stroll together, families set out simple picnics, and children splash in the shallows, their joyful shouts echoing across the water. You find a spot on the riverbank, the grass surprisingly soft beneath you. Your body settles comfortably, sinking into the natural contours of the ground. The air here is cooler, carrying the river's breath, and you feel your skin prickle pleasantly with the change in temperature. A welcome sensation. On a nearby blanket, a couple sits close together, sharing a meal from a single plate. They feed each other choice morsels, their heads bent close in conversation, an intimate dance of affection. There's an easy intimacy between them that speaks of a marriage built on genuine affection, not just social obligation. What you're seeing reflects the Egyptian ideal of marriage, a partnership based on mutual respect and, ideally, love. The ancient Egyptians believed that a good marriage should bring joy and comfort to both partners. This is reflected in their wisdom literature, where men are advised to love your wife with proper attention and make her heart glad as long as you live. A truly timeless piece of advice. Your body feels increasingly heavy and comfortable as you sit by the river, watching the life of ancient Egypt unfold around you. The rhythmic sound of the water lapping against the shore synchronizes with your breathing, which has grown deeper and more relaxed, a meditative rhythm. Women in Egyptian marriages had rights that were extraordinary for the ancient world. They could own property independently of their husbands, run businesses, testify in court and initiate divorce. Marriage contracts protected their financial interests, ensuring they wouldn't be left destitute if the marriage ended. One marriage contract from around 200 BCE states, "If I divorce you, I will give you 20 pieces of silver and return to you all that you brought." Another specifies that the husband must provide a certain amount of grain, oil and money each month for his wife's support. These were truly progressive legal safeguards. The sun is beginning to set now, painting the sky in shades of gold, orange and deep blue, a breathtaking tableau. Along the riverbank, oil lamps are being lit, creating pools of warm light as darkness gathers. The couple you've been observing rises, gathering their belongings. They walk hand in hand back towards the village, their silhouettes merging with the growing shadows, two figures becoming one. Your own body feels wonderfully heavy now, sinking deeper into the soft grass. The gentle sounds of the river and distant voices create a soothing backdrop as night falls over ancient Egypt, enveloping you in its ancient embrace. Let's talk about the physical space of an Egyptian marriage. The home. For ordinary Egyptians, houses were typically made of mud brick, with few windows to keep out the heat. They were often simple, with a main room for cooking and daily activities, sleeping areas that might be divided by curtains, and perhaps a roof terrace where family members would sleep during hot nights, seeking cooler air. Furniture was minimal by modern standards. Reed mats served as seating during the day and bedding at night. Wealthier homes might have wooden chairs, stools, and bed frames with woven cord or leather straps supporting a thin mattress. Storage consisted of baskets, pottery jars, and wooden chests. The simplicity might seem austere to modern eyes, but these homes were functional, comfortable, and served as the heart of family life, built for the climate and the community. You imagine the subtle differences in each home, the unique smells of different cooking fires, the personalized arrangements of baskets and mats. The weight of the evening descends fully now, a soft blanket of darkness. Your eyes are heavy. The distant sounds of the village are fading, replaced by the gentle symphony of the night, the chirping of crickets, the rustle of palm fronds in a soft breeze. You feel your consciousness drifting, sinking into the earth beneath you, becoming part of this ancient landscape. The story of ancient Egyptian love and marriage continues to unfold in your mind, a timeless narrative of human connection, affection, and the surprising ways people found joy and meaning in a world so different from our own. You are here, now, in this ancient moment, utterly at peace. Welcome, weary traveller, to a journey not through sun-drenched vineyards or bustling market squares, but straight into the smoky, slightly too damp, and frankly, a bit too gossipy, back alleys of a medieval Romanian village. Tonight, you're a young woman. Let's call you Agnes, mostly because you seem to attract an alarming amount of uninvited, unsolicited advice from other Agneses. And you're not just any young woman. You're Agnes, who is currently trembling at the whispers of a virginity test looming over her betrothal. Yes, you heard that right. Not a pop quiz on medieval farming techniques, or a bake-off judged by the local baker, or even a spelling bee. No, it's a full-blown purity probe. A kind of prenuptial examination, if you will, but with considerably more personal space invasion and zero chance of a fancy champagne toast afterwards. More like a strong, slightly dubious plum brandy, maybe, if you're lucky enough to afford it and brave enough to drink it. Picture yourself. It's just before dawn, standing by the village well. The air is sharp with the scent of damp earth, blooming hawthorn, and probably a distant, very active pig pen. A thick, oppressive mist still clings to the ground, making everything feel slightly damp and infinitely more ominous. Your patched wool dress is brushing your knees, already feeling itchy and restrictive, as you haul a creaky, splinter-prone bucket. Every groan of the rope, every splash of water, feels like a drumbeat counting down to your inevitable doom. The sun's barely up, a sliver of weak, indifferent light, struggling over the distant Carpathian foothills, casting long, distorted shadows that seem to mock your predicament. But the village isn't buzzing with market chatter, or the happy sounds of baby lambs frolicking in the fields. Oh no, it's buzzing with hushed, eager gossip about your upcoming marriage, and this dreaded test to prove your purity. Spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this hour without wishing you could magically transform into a squirrel and vanish into the nearest conveniently located, untestable forest. Or perhaps a particularly elusive badger, adept at digging holes and avoiding all forms of societal scrutiny. You even briefly consider attempting to spontaneously combust, but medieval clothing isn't quite that flammable, unfortunately. And besides, who wants to be remembered as Agnes, the one who exploded? Not you. So, before your metaphorical medieval self gets too comfortable, before the first drop of lead-infused makeup touches your skin, because yes, that was a beauty trend, truly an enlightened time, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. No forced smiles, no awkward social contracts that might require a purity test of their own. Just pure, unadulterated enjoyment. And while you're at it, drop a comment with your location and local time. I'd love to know where you're drifting off from. Is it a cosy evening in Bucharest? Or a bright morning in some far-off land? Knowing where you are helps me feel less like I'm screaming into the void of history, though sometimes it certainly feels that way. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum of impending historical awkwardness, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Try not to think too hard about the cold bucket water, or the looming test, or the ceaseless unsolicited advice from every single Agnes you encounter. It's a lot, honestly, a veritable cacophony of good intentions and bad ideas. The weight of gossip and a barley betrothal. You're standing at the village's heart, a cluster of wattle and daub cottages huddled around the well, the morning mist clinging to your skin like a bad reputation you just can't shake, no matter how much you try to scrub it off with harsh lye soap. The bucket's rope bites into your palms, leaving angry red marks, but it's the women's whispers that sting sharper, cutting through the damp morning air with surgical precision. Another Agnes, because of course there are multiple Agneses, it's medieval Romania. Everyone's named Agnes or Georga, sometimes both, and sometimes with the same exact birthmark on their left earlobe. A neighbour with a basket of turnips so large they could be medieval bowling balls leans in conspiratorially, her breath smelling faintly of stale cabbage. Her voice is lower than a toad's belly, and considerably more slimy, like she's just swallowed a particularly damp slug. "They'll test you before the wedding," she stage whispers, her words hitting you like a carefully aimed pebble, right between the eyes, leaving a metaphorical bruise. It hints at the midwife's probing hands, the village's prying eyes, and the general loss of any semblance of personal space you once imagined you had. You realise, with a sinking feeling that makes your stomach do a frantic little dance, like a frightened mouse trapped in a bucket, that your body is about to become a public art exhibition, a gruesome curiosity for the entire village, whether you like it or not. Your privacy, a concept vaguely understood even in these times, is about to be utterly obliterated. You're betrothed to the miller's son, a match your parents sealed for a strip of barley. Yes, barley. Not a dowry of gold or a promise of a grand estate, but a simple, humble grain. Your entire future, your entire existence, your very soul, is literally tied to a humble grain, a testament to the brutal practicality of medieval life. Forget romantic notions of love or shared dreams. Your destiny is intrinsically linked to the yield of a field, and more specifically, the miller's perceived trustworthiness of your family and their desire for a steady supply of grain. It's less about mutual affection and more about mutual agricultural benefit, a purely transactional arrangement disguised as matrimony. More than that, it's linked to the miller's opinion of your family's trustworthiness, and your family's opinion of your strict adherence to societal norms. Norms that seem to have been invented by someone with a severe aversion to joy, fun, or any form of individual expression. But this test, meant to prove your chastity, looms like a spectre who forgot its sheet and decided to show up anyway, probably with a clipboard, a stern expression, and a rather judgmental look in its ethereal eyes. You're barely 17, a mere slip of a girl, your hands rough from spinning wool and hauling water. The thought of such scrutiny makes your stomach churn more violently than your mother's questionable gruel on a particularly damp morning, which is saying something, considering its usual consistency. You just want to hide in a barrel, or perhaps dig a very deep hole in the ground and pull it in after you, transforming into a mole, but you're pretty sure someone would check in there too. Nowhere is safe from the medieval gaze. It seems to penetrate every nook and cranny of your existence. In medieval Europe, and particularly in regions like Romania, virginity tests were a harsh, undeniable, and utterly humiliating reality. They weren't a whispered rumour, but a well-established, if unscientific, practice, especially by the 13th century, when the church and community demanded rigorous proof of a bride's purity to secure those oh-so-crucial marriage alliances, like your family's precious barley strip. These tests, often invasive and notoriously unreliable, were rooted in a culture that tied a woman's entire worth to her chastity. It was less about individual virtue and more about property rights and ensuring the legitimacy of heirs, as well as preserving family lineage and reputation within the tight-knit village structure. A woman's virginity was often seen as her family's most valuable asset, a commodity to be protected and presented, almost like a certificate of authenticity. A quirky tidbit, often whispered around the hearths in hushed, reverent tones, probably to scare the younger girls into compliance and keep them in line. Some villagers genuinely believed a truly pure bride cast a brighter shadow at dusk, or that her presence made the crops grow taller, or even that her tears turned to dew that fertilized the fields. You're desperately hoping yours sparkles, perhaps even glows with a faint halo, or makes the turnips grow to an unprecedented size. But Agnes's knowing smirk suggests otherwise, a silent condemnation. Historians still argue whether these tests were about genuine moral control, or simply an effective form of social leverage, a way to keep everyone in their place and maintain social cohesion, ensuring no one stepped outside the strict boundaries of tradition. But, as you hold that bucket, its weight suddenly unbearable, feeling as heavy as a mountain. The weight of the gossip feels less like a social slight, and more like a very heavy chain around your neck, dragging you down into the muddy depths of societal expectation with no escape in sight. You trudge back to your family's cottage, the water sloshing precariously, threatening to spill over your worn wooden bucket, a metaphor for your life on the verge of spilling out of control. The village's chatter, a cacophony of voices and animal sounds, the lowing of cattle, the squealing of pigs, the endless cackling of geese, fades behind you, replaced only by the ominous clucking of chickens, who seem to know more about your impending doom than they let on, their beady eyes following your every move. Your mother's at the hearth stirring thin porridge, her face tight with worry lines that weren't there yesterday. She looks like she's aged 10 years overnight, a roadmap of anxiety etched onto her features, a silent plea for your cooperation. Your younger brother, meanwhile, is merrily mending a net, blissfully oblivious to the existential dread radiating from your very pores. He's probably dreaming of catching a big fish, a feast for the village, while you're just dreaming of escaping this situation, perhaps by becoming a very good, very fast fish, capable of leaping out of nets and swimming to freedom. The cottage smells of smoke and damp straw, a familiar, comforting scent that now feels suffocating, pressing in on you, and the goat in the corner is currently chewing your best and only mat, which feels like a perfectly timed metaphor for your life right now. Everything is slowly being chewed away, dismantled, and consumed by forces beyond your control. You set the bucket down with a thud, trying to shake Agnes's warning, but it clings to you like damp wool in a perpetual fog, refusing to dissipate, leaving you feeling cold and exposed, vulnerable to every gust of societal disapproval. The test isn't just about you. It's about family honor, the miller's trust, and the villager's approval. It's about securing your family's place in the pecking order of this tiny community, a position hard-won and easily lost. You've heard whispers of girls shamed, their marriages cancelled, their families scorned for failing. Their names became cautionary tales, their fates worse than a bad harvest, often leading to social ostracism, a forced life in a convent, or even worse, a lifetime of being the girl who failed the test, branded with a scarlet letter only visible to the judgmental. You're not even sure what the test entails. Midwives? Prayers? Something involving a very uncomfortable chair and possibly hot coals, or perhaps just a stern look and a highly subjective opinion from someone who last bathed a month ago. But the fear is very, very real. A cold, hard knot in your belly that tightens with every passing moment, threatening to strangle you from the inside out. Your mother glances up, catching your pale, drawn face, her eyes filled with a mirroring terror, a silent acknowledgement of the shared predicament, and asks about Agnes. You mumble vaguely about the test, trying to sound nonchalant, as if discussing the weather, but your voice cracks, betraying your terror, a fragile sound in the vast silence of your dread. Her eyes narrow, hardening with a desperate resolve, a steely determination to protect what little honor remains. She's heard the tales, too, of girls examined under harsh village scrutiny, their futures hinging on a midwife's arbitrary word, A word that could damn a family for generations, sending them plummeting down the social ladder into ignominy. This village is tiny, maybe 200 souls if you count the chickens, the aforementioned goat, that grumpy old man who never leaves his house, and the particularly ambitious mice who seem to run the grain storage. And gossip spreads faster than a runaway cartwheel downhill on market day, especially when it concerns something as scandalous as a virginity test. It's the village's main form of entertainment, apparently, a cruel spectator sport. You think about the market, where women trade stories of failed tests and broken betrothals, their voices hushed, but sharp enough to cut through solid oak, leaving splinters of doubt and judgment in their wake, scars that never fully heal. You're not even sure you're pure by their impossible, ever-shifting standards. Childhood games, a stolen kiss under the ancient oak tree with the shepherd's son who had surprisingly soft hands and smelled faintly of sheep, a scent you now find oddly comforting. A moment of curious exploration fueled by youthful innocence and a complete lack of parental supervision, a tiny spark of rebellion in an otherwise controlled existence? Could that count against you? The absurdity of it all almost makes you laugh, a hysterical, shaky sound that dies in your throat, lost in the smoke and quiet dread that fills the small cottage. Joke number 1. If purity is a test, you're hoping for an open-book version with no trick questions, maybe a sympathetic proctor, and definitely a cheat sheet hidden in your wimple, preferably written by a very modern, understanding historian who believes in personal autonomy and perhaps invented time travel. You sit by the hearth, the fire's weak heat barely warming your hands, trying to focus on mundane chores, but your mind races like a frightened mouse in a maze, unable to find an exit, bouncing off invisible walls of societal expectation. Your brother hums a tuneless, carefree melody, seemingly oblivious to the storm. He's probably dreaming of a new fishing lure, or a particularly tasty worm, while you're dreaming of a portal to a different century, a place where such tests are a distant, horrifying memory. But you're picturing the midwife's stern, unyielding face, her eyes boring into your very soul, seeking out any hidden secrets, the villager's judging stares, and the miller's son, waiting patiently for proof as if you were a new breed of livestock being inspected before purchase, your value to be determined by a quick examination. The Church says chastity is your sacred duty, a divine calling, a path to salvation, a heavenly virtue, a direct line to everlasting grace. But this test feels less like a blessing and more like a public inquisition that you definitely didn't sign up for, a cruel medieval reality show with no prize money and only humiliation as a reward. You think about Agnes's warning, the villager's whispers, and how the omnipresent fear of this test is as real and solid as the bucket at your feet, a tangible, suffocating presence. You're not sure how to face it, how to simply exist when every villager's eye is already on you, judging every single breath, every nervous twitch, every movement you make, scrutinizing your very being for any sign of deviation from the norm. Joke number 2. If gossip's a sport, this village deserves a crown for speed, endurance, and an Olympic gold in synchronized whispering. They're truly exceptional, a masterclass in character assassination and social condemnation. For now, you grab a broom to sweep the dirt floor, the well's ominous whispers echoing faintly in your mind, a haunting refrain, and brace for the test that could define or completely demolish your future in this little slice of medieval Romanian purgatory, where even the goats seem to be judging you with their inscrutable yellow eyes. You can almost feel the weight of centuries of patriarchal expectation pressing down on you, a burden heavier than any bucket of water or sack of barley. The priest's gaze and a sacred burden. You're still sweeping the cottage's dirt floor, the broom's bristles scratching a rhythm of relentless anxiety as the smoky air clings to your wool dress like a second skin, a suffocating shroud. Remember that heavy betrothal yoke and the looming virginity test. The hearth's faint embers cast a weak, struggling glow, barely illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air like tiny, judgmental spirits, and your mother's porridge pot sits, a lonely monument to morning worry, its contents long cold and congealed. Her sharp words about the miller's family, expecting the test, still echoing like a persistent, slightly off-key burp from a particularly pious and equally flatulent cow. The village morning hums, carts rattling over cobblestones, voices bartering loudly, a dog barking somewhere in the distance, a sound that usually brings comfort, now feels like a countdown, filters through the open door, a mundane soundtrack to your growing dread. But now the church's moral scrutiny looms even larger, its demand for your purity awaiting you, heavier than the entire strip of barley your betrothal secures, heavier than any physical burden you could ever carry. Your hands grip the broom so tightly your knuckles are white, the thought of the priest's judgment chilling you more than the damp morning mist, creeping through the cracks in the wall, seeping into your very bones, filling you with an existential cold. And you're bracing for his inevitable, probably very long, and undoubtedly very stern lecture, as you're summoned to the church to face his stern, unblinking gaze, a gaze that seems to pierce through your very soul, seeking out any hidden imperfection, any speck of perceived sin. In medieval Europe, and particularly in regions like Romania, the Catholic Church wielded immense, all-encompassing power over marriage, and by extension, over individual lives, often dictating the very fabric of society, from the highest noble to the lowest peasant. Especially by the 13th century, it fiercely enforced virginity tests as a moral imperative, a divine mandate. This was to ensure brides like you were pure, aligning perfectly with its doctrine that tied chastity to salvation, making it a matter of eternal consequence, a direct path to heaven or hell. Priests often oversaw these rituals, their scrutiny rooted in strict biblical ideals of female virtue, making the test a spiritual trial as much as a physical one. It was less about your body and more about your eternal soul, apparently, and how it fit into the Church's grand, unyielding plan for moral order, a divine blueprint for human behaviour. A quirky tidbit, probably not meant to be humorous in the least, and certainly not to Agnes, who is currently contemplating her options. Some priests sprinkled holy dew, water blessed with herbs, or at least that's what they claimed, probably just some stagnant pond water with a bit of a prayer mumbled over it, on brides to cleanse their souls before testing, a symbolic purification before the actual probe. You're dreading a splash of it, imagining its cold, judgmental sting on your face, perhaps causing a sudden involuntary spasm of piety, or just a bad rash that would only add to your woes and make you even more unsightly in their unforgiving eyes. Historians still argue whether this scrutiny was about genuine spiritual purity, or simply an effective form of social control, a way to maintain the rigid hierarchical order and prevent unsanctioned relationships that might challenge the established power structures and destabilize the community. But as you set the broom aside, its usefulness suddenly meaningless in the face of spiritual judgment, the priest's looming judgment feels less like a gentle hand of God and more like a very tight noose tightening around your neck, slowly but surely, threatening to cut off your very breath. You step outside, the air sharp with wood smoke and damp earth, forcing yourself to trudge toward the cold, ancient stone chapel. Every step feels heavier than the last, as if you're walking through thick mud, each footfall dragging you closer to an uncomfortable destiny. Its bell tolls low, a mournful sound that could be a warning, or perhaps just a reminder that everyone else's day is probably better than yours, or that another hour has passed without incident, drawing you closer to your fate, a relentless tick-tock of doom. Your mother's voice trails behind you, thin and strained with anxiety, urging you to mind the priest, her fear of family shame driving her words sharper than a winter wind cutting across the plains, biting at your exposed skin, leaving you raw. The village paths buzz, neighbours hauling heavy baskets of produce, children dodging carts with reckless abandon, a stray dog chasing a particularly optimistic chicken, but you feel their eyes, 100 tiny pinpricks, already whispering about your betrothal and the test. "She's for the miller's boy," a woman mutters, her basket of leeks momentarily forgotten as she stares with an unsettling intensity, and you flush, the wool dress itching worse under their collective scrutiny, as if their gazes are literally burning your skin, leaving indelible marks of shame. You think back to the well, Agnes's warning about the midwife's hands and realise the test's public nature enforced by the church, is Father John's will amplified, a grand, uncomfortable stage for the entire village to judge your soul and your very mortal body, a spectacle of purity and public humiliation. The miller's son's flour-dusted grin at the market flashes in your mind, a fleeting image of naive kindness, a ghost of simpler times before this nightmare began. But now you dread his family's stiff, expectant presence at the church door, their subtle nods or sharp frowns sealing your worth, or lack thereof for all to see, a public declaration of your value, or lack of it. You're not even sure what pure means anymore, lost in a sea of definitions and expectations, a labyrinth of societal rules that seem designed to ensnare you. But the church's rules feel less like divine guidance and more like an inescapable, suffocating trap that tightens with every breath, every heartbeat. You push open the chapel's heavy wooden door, the ancient hinges groaning a welcome that sounds more like a mournful sigh, or perhaps the creak of a dungeon door opening for its next victim. The air inside is thick with incense and mildew, a potent mix of sanctity and dampness, cloying and heavy, pressing down on you. The stone floor is cold under your worn shoes, chilling you to the bone, sending shivers up your spine that have nothing to do with the temperature and everything to do with dread. Father John, a gaunt man with eyes like flint chips, stands by the altar, his prayer book clutched like a judge's gavel, ready to strike a final damning verdict. His stare pins you to the spot, a spiritual spear, and you instinctively drop your gaze, unable to meet his eyes, the wool dress itching worse under his intense scrutiny, as if it's suddenly a hair shirt, rough against your skin. "Chastity is God's command," he begins, his voice low but cutting, slicing through the air like a rusty blade, and you flinch, already dreading the inevitable, interminable sermon that will surely follow, each word a condemnation. He speaks of Eve's original sin, of how all women must constantly prove their purity to avoid her dreadful fate, a fate that apparently involves endless toil and judgment, passed down through generations, an ancestral curse. You want to roll your eyes so hard they get stuck, perhaps even spontaneously combust, from sheer exasperation at the sheer unfairness of it all, but you manage to keep a straight face, barely. Joke number 1. If Eve's the problem, you'd like a word with Adam about fairness in the Garden of Eden, preferably with a full, unedited transcript, and a good legal team who isn't afraid to challenge divine authority, even if it means negotiating with a talking snake. "The test," he intones, his voice gaining volume, echoing off the stone walls, ensures your soul's worth for marriage, a sacred duty to the miller's son, and more importantly, to God. The priest paces, his robe swishing like a judgmental breeze, and warns that failing the test risks your salvation, your family's precious honour, and the village's trust. It's a terrifying trinity of doom, a three-pronged attack on your future. You think back to the cottage, your mother's desperate talk of the barley strip, and realise the church's rigorous scrutiny is her reluctant ally, pushing you relentlessly toward the midwife's table, a theological push, backed by economic necessity and overwhelming societal pressure. You've heard tales from the market, girls shamed in church courts, their betrothals broken, their names cursed and whispered about for impurity, reduced to pariahs, forced to live on the fringes of society, stripped of all dignity. Father John's holy dew, a vial glinting in a small vial on the altar, waits to anoint you, but it feels less like a blessing and more like a final damning mark of judgment, a seal on your fate that you cannot escape, a brand of impurity. You're tempted for a fleeting moment to ask what men prove, what their tests entail, if they face such public scrutiny, such invasive examinations, but silence is definitely safer and probably wiser in this sacred patriarchal space where questions are not welcome. Joke number 2. If purity is a test, you're hoping men get a pop quiz too, maybe on not leaving their muddy boots in the hall, or perhaps on remembering their wedding anniversaries without a written reminder, or even how to properly churn butter without complaining. He hands you a candle to light at the Virgin's shrine, a gesture of mercy that feels suspiciously like a leash around your neck dragging you forward. You take it, the wax cold and unyielding in your trembling hands, and mutter a promise to pray, your mind racing, already plotting your escape plan to a life of quiet anonymity, perhaps as a hermit in the distant mountains, living off berries and the occasional lost sheep, far from judgmental eyes. The Church's rigid rules, chastity, obedience, submission, bind you tighter than the betrothal's pledge ribbon, and the test, the dreaded test, is their ultimate, undeniable tool, forged in doctrine and enforced by fear, a sword hanging over your head, ready to fall. You think about Agnes's warning, the village's pervasive gossip, and know the priest's scrutiny will follow you to the midwife's examination, his judgment a silent, heavy weight, far heavier than her hands. You step outside, the bell tolling behind you, its solemn sound echoing through the quiet village, the path seeming narrower, as if closing in around you, trapping you in this suffocating reality. You think about Agnes's sister's birth thread, a symbol of private, gentle care, and wish desperately for her compassion to shield you now, to wrap you in a protective embrace, to make you invisible to the prying eyes. Joke number 3. If God's watching this test, you're hoping he's got a softer, more understanding judge than Father John, preferably one who's seen a bit more of the world than just stained glass windows and dusty scripture, and perhaps has a good sense of humour about human imperfections. For now, you head home. The candle's flickering light, a grim reminder of the Church's suffocating moral grip, bracing for the test that could sear your soul as much as your innocent body, a test that promises to define your very existence. The midwife's hands and a private inquisition. You're trudging back from the church, the priest's stern lecture. Remember that holy dew and Eve's inconvenient, eternally lingering sin, still ringing in your ears like a persistent, utterly unwelcome doorbell that won't stop chiming, echoing off the ancient stone houses. Your wool dress is itching under the morning sun, already feeling too tight and constricting, a woolly cage, and the candle he gave you weighs heavy in your hand, its wax a solid, unforgiving reminder of the Church's moral scrutiny over your betrodhal's virginity test. The village paths hum, neighbours bartering loudly, a dog barking somewhere, chickens clucking their perpetual judgment, the distant bleating of sheep. But the weight of proving your purity to the miller's son and Father John presses harder now, a physical ache in your chest, a crushing burden that steals your breath. As you near your family's cottage, its familiar outline a beacon of false hope, a mirage of safety, you realise, with a fresh wave of dread, that you're directly facing the midwife's invasive role, her hand set to examine you in a ritual that's as much about satisfying the village's insatiable gossip as it is about your actual personal chastity. Your heart pounds, a frantic drum against your ribs, the dirt path rough under your worn shoes, threatening to trip you, sending you sprawling into the mud, and you're bracing for the humiliating moment your mother calls for the midwife to finally prepare for this ordeal, this private inquisition that will become a public spectacle. In medieval Europe, and particularly in regions like Romania, midwives often performed virginity tests, especially by the 13th century. They acted as the church's and community's direct agents to physically verify a bride's purity, a practice that was invasive and often painfully traumatic for women like you, due to crude methods and a distinct alarming lack of actual medical knowledge or understanding of female anatomy. These tests, rooted deeply in patriarchal assumptions about female anatomy and morality, were notoriously unreliable and fundamentally traumatic. Yet, they were absolutely critical to sealing marriage contracts and maintaining social order, serving as a public declaration of a woman's value and a family's honour, a stamp of societal approval, a brand of legitimacy. A quirky tidbit, which probably brought cold comfort at the time, and even less now, considering the context. Some midwives used a virtue salve, a herbal paste supposedly applied during tests to ease the process, a meagre attempt at comfort in the face of a terrifying ordeal. You're picturing it in Widow Agnes's basket, its scent sharp, probably smelling vaguely of pond water and regret, perhaps a hint of disappointment, or even a dash of dried toad, but offering precisely zero comfort against the very real impending pain and psychological intrusion. Historians still argue whether midwives were reluctant enforcers or willing gatekeepers of this system, navigating a complex role between women's health and societal demands, forced to compromise their compassion for tradition. But as you push open the cottage door, its familiar wood feeling foreign in your hand, heavy and unyielding, the midwife's role feels less like care and more like a profound betrayal, dressed up in the familiar, comforting guise of a woman's hands, making it all the more insidious and heartbreaking. The smoky air hits you, thick and cloying, stinging your eyes, making them water as if you're already crying. Your mother's at the hearth, stirring porridge, her glance sharp as she spots the candle, a symbol of your unwelcome journey to the chapel. "Father John spoke?" she asks, her voice tight with unspoken fear, a shared anxiety that binds you, a heavy, unspoken truth. You nod, mumbling vaguely about purity and prayer, expertly avoiding the test's more gruesome details, trying to gloss over the terrifying reality with vague platitudes. She sighs, a sound of resignation more than relief, setting the spoon down with a clatter that echoes in the sudden silence. Then she says with grim finality, "We'll call Widow Agnes tomorrow." Your stomach lurches, a sudden cold spasm, as if you've swallowed a block of ice that's melting slowly, painfully. Agnes's sister, the village midwife, is generally kind, known for her gentle hands during births, her experience bringing comfort in moments of crisis, her presence usually a source of calm and reassurance. But now she's bound by a different, harsher duty, a societal obligation that transcends personal kindness and empathy. Her skilled hands, once symbols of life and new beginnings, now carry the weight of tradition, tasked with probing your chastity, to determine your worth in the eyes of the village elders and the miller's family. You think back to the church, Father John's interminable lecture on your soul's worth, and realise the midwife's examination is his will made flesh, a brutal physical ritual designed to satisfy the miller's family and the village's relentless prying eyes, who will be waiting for the verdict with bated breath and sharpened tongues, ready to pounce on any sign of imperfection. Your brother, still merrily mending his net, looks up, oblivious to the storm brewing around you, his innocence a stark contrast to your turmoil. But you feel the test's shadow closing in, cold and inescapable, casting a pall over your entire existence, a dark cloud that promises no silver lining, only more grey. You sink onto a stool, the wool dress scratching your thighs, and picture Widow Agnes's cottage, its herb-scented air trying its best to hide the grim tools of her trade, basins, cloths, perhaps that infamous chastity cloth, waiting like a shroud, ready to envelop you in judgment, to absorb your humiliation, to bear witness to your vulnerability. You've seen her at births, her hands gentle and firm, ushering new life into the world, a truly beautiful and awe-inspiring act. But this is different. This is a public verdict on your most private body, a moment of profound vulnerability and utter powerlessness, a public exhibition of your intimate self. You think back to the well, Agnes's warning about the test's probing hands, and imagine the pain, the cold, clinical intrusion, your privacy stripped bare for the miller's son's trust and the village's insatiable gossip, a sacrifice on the altar of societal expectation. The church says chastity is sacred, a divine gift, a path to spiritual enlightenment, a heavenly virtue, but the midwife's role feels less like a holy blessing and more like a profound violation, her hands carrying the entire weight of the village's judgment, a burden she is forced to wield. You're tempted to beg your mother to skip it, to concoct some elaborate excuse involving a sudden, mysterious fever, a plague that only affects young women about to be tested, or a sudden and very convincing appearance of the Black Death. But her grim talk of the barley strips silences you, chaining you to your fate, a prisoner of circumstances, a pawn in a larger game. Joke number 1. If purity is a cloth, you're hoping it's less scratchy and considerably more comfortable than this darn wool dress, and maybe made of silk, perhaps spun by fairies under a full moon. Definitely not by you. The cottage's air is thick, the smoke stinging your eyes as you think about the church's relentless scrutiny, Father John's lecture tying your chastity directly to your eternal salvation, effectively making Widow Agnes's hands his wholly unyielding enforcers. It's a terrifying thought that your fate, both earthly and divine, rests in these hands, in this single terrifying moment, a moment that will define your future. You've heard market tales, girls bruised by tests, their pain dismissed as proof of guilt, their betrothals hanging by a thread, hinging entirely on a midwife's arbitrary nod, a slight movement of her head determining a lifetime of despair and social ruin. You're not sure what Widow Agnes will seek. Blood? Tightness? Some vague, unscientific sign that could mean anything or nothing, concocted from old wives' tales and superstitious beliefs that have no basis in reality, only in fear. But the fear's real, a solid, aching knot in your gut that won't loosen, no matter how hard you try to breathe, how much you try to calm yourself, how many deep breaths you take. You think about old Midge, shunned after her test failed, her body's scars a grim, visible village warning, a living testament to failure, her life a cautionary tale, and dread the moment you lie under the midwife's professional, unfeeling gaze, your entire honour in her very literal hands, your entire future decided in a moment, in a flash. You think about Agnes's sister's birth thread, a symbol of private, gentle care, and wish desperately it could somehow magically replace the cold, clinical chastity cloth, wrapping you in a cocoon of safety, a shield against the world's harshness. This entire process is pain. Its intrusion feels less like a medical examination and more like a violation dressed up as sacred duty, a public performance of your most private self, for all to dissect and discuss, to judge and condemn. You stand, stepping to the door, the air cooler but heavy with the ubiquitous wood smoke and damp straw. The village paths buzz, men mending fences, women trading gossip with alarming speed, children playing games you no longer understand. But you're a ghost among them, the test's painful process a spectre you can't outrun, no matter how fast you might dream of running. How far you might wish to escape, there's no hiding place. Your mother's voice follows, thin and strained, calling you to help with chores, but her tone betrays her deeper fear of the test's inevitable verdict, shaming your kin, bringing disgrace upon their name for generations, a stain that can never be washed away, a mark of shame. You've heard of girls crying during these examinations, their bodies sore for days, some never quite the same, bearing the physical and emotional scars for life, silent reminders of their ordeal, etched into their very souls. The virtue salve, meant to ease it, sounds like a cruel jest. A medieval version of rub some dirt on it when your arm is broken and bone is protruding through the skin. How can a few herbs soften such a profound, soul-searing trial? You think about the miller's son, his simple grin at the market, and wonder if he'd flinch at your pain, or just demand the midwife's cold, impersonal seal of approval, prioritizing social standing over human suffering, his own comfort over your dignity and well-being. You think about the honor cord above the hearth, its frayed weave, and fear failing it. Fear watching your family's reputation unravel like a cheap garment, leaving them exposed and vulnerable to the villagers' scorn, their legacy ruined. Joke number 2. If tests are supposed to be gentle, you'd honestly rather face a dragon's fiery breath than this virtue salve, and the hands that apply it. At least the dragon would be quick, and the pain would be over faster, and you'd have a cool story to tell if you survived. Your sister returns, her bucket sloshing, her glance meeting yours, and you see her fear mirror your own, a silent understanding passing between you, a shared burden, a bond forged in mutual dread. The village's stares, the church's unyielding rules, your family's desperate honour, they're all pushing you, inexorably, toward Widow Agnes's hands, and you are so not ready for what tomorrow holds, for the morning that promises to change everything, to define your entire life.